Everyone is showing off their contracts with the gods. But him? He's hiding his power and keeping his name off the radar for their own safety. Unable to stand the bullying towards the nameless goddess, Yuno decides to make her stronger and glorify the name given to her throughout the world. He's not weak, he's just saving the drama for the final act. The question is, will hiding his strength be his downfall or his greatest flex? Let's find out. The story began with a man kneeling before a goddess. God's covenant is a lifetime ceremony. God congratulated him on his birth. He wants to make a pact with him. They were very happy for him because he was born at such an important ceremony, to make a pact with a god whose name he had never heard. He was given great power. God said that he would have a prosperous future. He would take care of the rest himself. The protagonist thought that the pact with the lower god was made at this point, and at the same time, everything ended there. As a child, he was usually busy trying to control his tearing power. Looking at the academy, he asked, "A prosperous future, huh?" He thought, therefore, because of this, he did not train enough. The next second, he walked down the school corridor, but was stopped by Maru, calling him. He thought that at some point he must have been called incompetent. He folded his arms across his chest and declared that this place wasn't a trash can. He was just an ordinary commoner who could use a sword and had weak magic. What mistake did the Magic Knight Academy make to enroll him? The protagonist looked away and thought, not that he wanted to. The Royal Magic Knight Academy in the capital was a sacred academy where only the promising offspring of the elite could step through its gates. He thought he just wanted to live a quiet life in the countryside, earning money by working on a farm. The student shouted, "Hey, is he even listening to him?" The protagonist spread his arms out and apologized to him. He more or less passed the entrance exam, so from now on, they would be classmates. He was indignant. What was he saying? Since when could the third son of a knight address the second son of an earl like that? Shouldn't he change his tone? He was surprised, right? He was sure that their titles would be nullified within the academy's territory. The next second, a magic projectile flew at him, but he managed to move his head, dodging the attack. Maru, still pointing his hand at him, said since he was clearly out of touch with reality, he would enlighten him for old time's sake. Then he shouted, "This is no place for incompetent people with no talent who don't even try to improve." He was sure that he had cheated his way into the academy anyway in the name of the Asteroth family. All of them. They don't want to be in a class with someone who will give them a reputation for being untalented? Right, guys? The others agreed with him, and at that moment, Alice came out to them and, putting her hand on her waist, said, "God, guys, they certainly have the right to talk nonsense, but they must shut up and listen to her. Yuno is here because he passed the exam honestly with his abilities. Do they understand? He may not be a master of the sword or magic, but he was smart enough to get in, and they were all childhood friends, so they knew each other well, right?" Maru turned around and looked at her indignantly. He then sighed and spread his arms out to the side, saying as expected of Miss Alice, who had won first place in the entrance exam. At least she was in a position to act so arrogantly. She thoughtfully put her fingers to her chin and asked, "How about doing a quick test to compare their exam results?" There was no way he was being bullied by someone with barely a passing grade, you know, right? Maru blushed indignantly, and she asked what he thought. He waved his hand and shouted, "Hey, guys, did they know? The Marquise's daughter has fallen in love with Sir Knight Yuno. He doesn't really like the idea of arguing with someone who is just showing their feelings." MC thought that his actions were in vain. Maru, no one can stop Alice. He had never seen her lose in a verbal fight since she was born. Then he looked at her embarrassed face in surprise. The other students were discussing, did they hear that? What kind of relationship do they have? In any case, his attitude towards her had changed. Wasn't Yuno a mediocrity? It seemed like the best solution was to stay away from them. The protagonist thought that he didn't mind being scorned alone, but this kind of attitude towards Alice was a different matter. As time went by, he remembered his father saying that if he didn't enter the Magic Knight Academy, he would be expelled from the Asteroth family. It was an order that his father had succeeded in giving, a sign of recognition of his incompetence. He really didn't mind being expelled from home. Then his sister hugged him from behind and said that she wished him luck. As his older sister, she believed in him. His sister literally pushed him to take the exam. He put his hand on his chest and thought, in any case, he fulfilled all the conditions. After that, he said that everyone should listen to him. From today, he was going. But before he could finish speaking, Soleil entered the room and said, "Great, everyone should sit down in their seats. They should not stand like pillars." He waved his hand, pointing at the students. After that, Maru tsked in irritation and headed to his seat. MC thought, apparently, they left him alone for a while. Then he sat down next to Alice and apologized for that. He thanked her for standing up for him. She replied that everything was fine, nothing special. After that, Soleil stood behind the podium and congratulated everyone on their admission. Starting from today, he will look after them. He would like to greet all those present who successfully entered. He hopes that they will have a wonderful future. The next second, Maru raised his hand and called him, saying that he thought there was someone among them who was enrolled by mistake. He wondered what he meant. He replied, it was Yuno Astario. Could he please explain how someone who couldn't handle a sword or use magic could enroll here? The teacher then started flipping through the notes and said thoughtfully, Yuno Astario, his grade for the practical part certainly wasn't the best, but their academy has been holding written exams since its foundation, and he was the first one to get a perfect score for it. Maru's mouth dropped open in surprise, and Alice sighed and said that it was fun. The teacher then added, well, that's right. Maybe Maru should follow Yuno's example and study harder. First, he would explain the most important rules of their academy to them. After that, he turned to the board and wrote with chalk, using swords or magic is prohibited outside the designated areas. Until graduation, their social status in the academy does not matter. They must carefully carry out the covenants of God. For them to be careful with the covenants, it is a very important ritual. It is carried out only once in a lifetime. He is sure that they all already know this, but the power of God granted to them is proportional to their fame. So if they made a pact with a famous god, they will gain much more power. It is not an exaggeration to say that their fate, their future, will be determined by the god with whom they make a pact. At this moment, the protagonist thought, the name of that old man is not mentioned in any literature, so why him? The next second, the student raised her hand and called the teacher, saying that she had a question. She heard that in the past, there were cases of people making pacts with several gods. Is this possible? He confirmed it, but it is a very rare case. But now about the covenants, it will be easier to hear about it from first-hand sources than from him. The students joyfully shouted, it begins. MC asked in surprise, what? Then he looked at Alice and remembered the words, you might not want to watch this. What did Alice mean by saying that so bitterly? He figured it out quickly enough. The next second, a goddess entered the classroom and greeted everyone, saying that she was a god with no name. The protagonist said in surprise, a nameless god. Soleil then pointed at her and said that he thought many of them already knew her as a famous god in the academy. Being able to hear from a god's mouth was a privilege, so they should pay attention. The other students were surprised. Is this a god? He must be joking. The goddess said they knew of her existence as a wandering god. Maru raised his hand and happily declared that he knew. A weak god with no name. She replied that that was correct. Nameless gods like her, they could provide personal significant benefits. So they had to be careful not to make a pact with such a god. She would teach them some rules from the gods. First, a god must always answer when someone called his name. When making a pact, they could protect themselves by simply asking for the god's name. Maru raised his hand again and asked if he could ask for her name then. She replied that she had no name. This was a good example. Stray gods like her would not be able to answer that question. He replied that he was so sorry. The students whispered among themselves, wondering what they were even trying to show them. Maru then stood up from his seat and said, of course, if someone wanted to make a pact like that, they could call her whatever they wanted, right? She replied that she did. He then walked over and put his hand on his chest and told her to let him make a pact with her. She asked in surprise, was that really what he wanted? The protagonist thought he was lying. The student asked what he had to do for that. The protagonist thought he had to stop. The goddess replied that he had to kneel down on one knee, then kiss her hand. He repeated, kneel down on one knee, then. She said in surprise, did he really want to do that? She meant that she didn't have a name, and she couldn't give him much. He already has a named one, doesn't he? The protagonist thought he had to stop right now. By the way, the student said, isn't Talentless God her name? That name suited someone like her so well, he didn't even have to come up with a new one for her, right? After that, he stepped forward and waved his arms, happily saying, but that was a good experience. Thanks to Talentless God, he was ready for the real ceremony. The goddess turned her gaze and said, please. The protagonist thought they had to stop bullying. One of Maru's friends said with a smirk that they should try too. MC thought that humans are unworthy of mocking gods. After that, he stood up from his seat. Alice called out to him in surprise, and he asked if she knew about it. She replied that there was a famous wandering god here who had not been able to make a pact with anyone for 12 years. She extended her hand to him and told him not to do anything reckless. Since he was able to enter the academy, he could make a pact with a strong god and be reborn, but now is not the time. He smiled and thanked her. She really knows him well. She added, of course, she is his friend. So please. The protagonist said that he had better run, and she shouted at him not to go. Maru turned around in surprise when the protagonist sharply punched him in the stomach. The people present looked on in bewilderment. The student fell to the ground from this blow. The others said that this couldn't be. MC thought that, frankly, he was fed up with being mocked for his mediocrity. The god who called himself Zeus. He didn't know what he was thinking when he entrusted him with such power. This power could become the source of an imminent disaster, so he decided to hide his abilities and become a mediocrity for everyone. The next second, he knelt down and decided that today was the first time he wanted to use his power for someone. The goddess, putting her hands to her chest, looked at him in surprise and he said, his god. He wanted to see a smile on her face. He asked him to make a contract with him. That was the only thing that moved him. She asked, does he really mean it? This is another joke, right? He extended his hand to her and asked, would she like to try? He thought, if the god's words were proportional to his power, then with his power he could probably increase the power of this wandering god. He just didn't want to see sadness on this childish face. Then she gently extended her hand to his, and he kissed it. A tear fell from her eyes, and she smiled and asked him to give her a name. This was the face he wanted to see, and then he said, Athena. From now on, this will be her name. She closed her eyes in admiration and said, Athena, the divine name. The protagonist noticed that tears did not suit her. From now on, he would always be on her side. She asked if he could tell her his name. He answered, Juno Astrio. He thinks he will start taking things more seriously. After a while, they walked down the street, and students turned to talk to each other. Was this the first-year student from the rumors? He heard that he made a contract with the wandering god. What a fool. He would soon regret it. Then, Athena called the protagonist, and he asked if something was wrong. She put her hand on her chest and apologized sheepishly, saying it was because of her. He smiled and thought how cute she was. He said that she simply captivated everyone with her beauty. She became embarrassed and asked him not to laugh at her. By any chance, did he regret making a contract with her? He thought it was incredibly cute and smiled and said that he did not regret it at all. In fact, he was very glad that he did it. It had only been a few days since they made the contract. But since then, his name has already become known throughout the academy. Not as a first year who made a contract with a wandering god, but rather, one of the students asked if he was the guy who beat up the Earl's second son. MC thought as a first year who was suspended on the first day for a violent incident. The students continued, isn't this what usually happens after their statuses are leveled? Beating up other people. The protagonist just came back from suspension and hearing these conversations, he thought they misunderstood. He didn't beat him up, he only hit him once. After a while, they came to class, and the teacher told them to open this page in the textbook. Good, as they can see. The next second, the classroom door opened slightly, and Athena looked out. She smiled and thought, finally she made a contract with someone. He smiled and waved at her, and Alice, who was sitting next to him, said that he had a strange expression on his face. Turning to her, he sighed and apologized. She said that it wasn't because he decided to make a contract with a wandering god, but he had to be careful with Maru and his friends. He looked at them in surprise, and she added, if he remembered, their class would have a mock battle after lunch. They would probably use this to get revenge on him. He replied that she shouldn't worry about it. Athena would be with him. She added that she wouldn't hide the fact that she was curious about how far he could go. But even so, the protagonist thought that it was true. Today, during the mock battle, he would have his first chance to show off the blessings Athena had given him. His main goal was to make the former nameless god Athena, who was looked down upon by everyone, famous. And to do that, he needed to prove that she was competent. One of the blessings he received from Athena was the art of wielding a spear. It was a skill that allowed one to skillfully use a spear. He was also born with a powerful blessing from Zeus, thanks to which he gained overwhelming power that no ordinary person could wield. In other words, if he, who was called talentless, were to achieve an impressive victory using a spear, word might spread that Athena, a former wandering god, was actually a great goddess. Today's fight might be an important first step to improving her reputation. He thought, if that word spread, more people would want to get a contract with her. That would mean her fame would increase. He wanted to stay close if possible. He then looked at Athena and thought, apparently gods could change their appearance at will if they had a body. Several students passed by her and asked why she was here. A wandering god? MC thought, however, his goddess couldn't do that because she wasn't very popular. She could only use a small portion of her power. He didn't want her to stand outside the classroom and wait like that. He would help her gain the ability to disappear or become invisible eventually. Athena saw his gaze on her and smiled sheepishly. He thought she was cute. And at that moment, the teacher came up to him and noticed that he was frozen. He should go to the management room later. Did he understand? He confirmed it. And then, their training battle began. Ferris Magic Knight Academy, Arena. Athena, peeking out from behind the stands, called out to the protagonist and asked him not to overexert himself. Okay? He picked up a long stick and told her not to worry. He would be fine. With the skill he received from her, his opponents simply did not stand a chance. She said that she would cheer for him. The next second, Salil came out to the weapon stand and told everyone to gather around him. He had to explain to them. He pointed at the weapons and explained that today would be their first training battle. Therefore, in order to avoid unforeseen incidents, they prepared weapons with low injury risk. Moreover, regarding magic, they can only use beginner-level spells. They can choose their own opponent until they are paired one-on-one. If there is no one here they want to compete with, they will assign them themselves, that's all. The protagonist, crouching on the ground, looked at Alice and said if she is paired with him, please, she should be gentle with him. She replied that she will not hold back, okay? After that, the teacher said, those who are ready should come forward. MC thought that he would like to fight Alice. At that moment, Maru came to him and told him to fight him. Athena looked at him in surprise, and he told Maru that he was holding back. He replied that he was interested to see how he would fight after making such a contract. He made a contract with a wandering god, huh? He doesn't think he will do well. Then they entered the arena and stood opposite each other. Maru smirked as he noticed him coming and said that he admired his courage. The protagonist replied that he shouldn't underestimate him, a man who made a contract with a god. He smirked. When one mediocrity cooperates with another mediocrity, they are still no match for him. After that, the teacher raised his hand and said, "Great, let's begin." Maru crossed his arms in front of him and, directing a slashing attack forward, shouted, "He must go to hell, Yuno." He used the wind blade. The protagonist turned around and ran in the opposite direction. Alice, confused, shouted, "What is he doing? He must avoid this." She thought, no matter how much power he gained from the god, the Byrne family is very gifted in magic. It is dangerous for him to continue. She then looked in surprise as he swung his spear and advanced his opponent's attack. She thought in surprise, he deflected the wind with his spear. At that moment, Maru pointed his hand at the protagonist and shouted, "He's an idiot! Windblade!" But before he could finish speaking, MC, who was kneeling in front of him, suddenly rose up and stabbed him in the stomach with his spear. He thought that this was the first time he used his powers on his own accord. Athena looked at what was happening in surprise. Alice also looked at the fight in confusion and said, Yuno knocked Maru down in an instant. His opponent knelt down and started coughing. Then the protagonist looked at his hand and clenched it into a fist, thinking that he can control this, he can do this. He remembered how he sent a powerful energy at his sister, and then he thought that he can't stop it. Older sister. He once almost killed his sister with an unexpected burst of power. Even if he can calmly control the power granted to him by Zeus, the limit of it is still unknown. And even now, he felt excited as he saw Maru collapse in front of him. He looked at his palm again and decided that one day, when he learned how to use his power, he would definitely. He was pulled out of his thoughts by Athena, who called him and said enthusiastically, "That was amazing. Absolutely brilliant." He looked at her in surprise and thought, "That's right. He has Athena on his side." He smiled and raised his spear in the air, shouting, "The spear art she gave him works great." He thought, with her on his side, he wouldn't go down the wrong path. After that, another student appeared behind the protagonist and, swinging his weapon, shouted that he shouldn't be so arrogant. He would fight him next. The protagonist pointed his spear at him and said, as he thought, it seems he should bring him back to reality. After that, he attacked his opponent in the stomach, and then several more students. After a while, they were lying in a pile, and he thought, did he get too carried away? After that, he turned around and looked at Athena, decided that it was not so. He did everything right, because today. The students watching the battle, perplexed, said, "No way, against 10, isn't Yuno insanely strong? Maybe he should make a contract too." MC thought that today they took the first step towards their new life. The next day, rumors of his amazing victory in the mock battle quickly spread throughout the academy. When he and the goddess walked down the street, the students were talking among themselves. One of them said that he heard that this wandering god is actually good. Her name seems to be Athena. To be honest, he really likes the way she looks. His comrade added, "Wow, she's cute." How did he not notice before that the goddess is cute? As the protagonist planned, Athena began to receive attention. And on the other hand, one of the students looked at the protagonist and asked, "Is that him? The one who turned his classmates into a bloody mess?" He thought, for some reason, he became known as a devious troublemaker. The student then added, "No matter if this is his first training battle, turning it into a bloodbath is a bit much." He thought, that's not it. There was no bloody mess at all. They were all defeated with a single blow, one blow. Athena then happily told Yuno to look, she can now float. She hovered in the air for a moment, and he clenched his fist and shouted, "This is amazing." This means her name is becoming more popular and her divine powers are improving. A student passing by expressed annoyance and said, "This useless one is really overestimating himself." Athena's reputation in the academy is growing, but on the other hand, rumors about him continue to spread like wildfire. After some time, the protagonist was sitting in the office and looking out the window, thought that there was no point in worrying about it now. Besides, if he could see Athena's smile, he could ignore a few rumors about himself. Alice came up to him and said that he should go already. He was surprised. The next lesson was in a different room? She asked in surprise. He didn't hear a single word from Teacher Soleil, right? He replied that he really didn't. She sighed, and pointing her hand out the window, explained that today they would have an acquaintance. Over there, at St. Ferris Girls' Academy. He was surprised. An acquaintance? What did she mean? St. Ferris Girls' Academy is a prestigious educational institution for young ladies, where most of the students are daughters of aristocratic families. Approaching the gates of the institution, he thought, students of the Magical Knight Academy must become knights for one of the students of the Girls' Academy to protect them. This is part of their traditional curriculum. Alice had said a while ago that they were deciding who they would serve today. MC had told her to wait a second. How could they serve someone from another academy? She explained that after he found a partner, he would of course go to the academy and from there with that person until graduation. The classes or lessons that were previously held in their classroom would now be shared with the students from the sister academy, and they would work in pairs. He replied that he didn't know about that. And by the way, how would he decide who his partner would be? He wondered if this was a chance for him to really get to know the girl. She raised her index finger and added, as she had already said, through introductions. Usually, the introduction meeting would be held in the auditorium of the Girls' Academy. They would meet with another person as many times as needed until both sides were satisfied. The girl student of the Girls' Academy had read up on them, the knights, in advance, and so she would immediately appoint the knight she had chosen. Basically, the knight side is more passive. He smiled and thought, this is how they decide who to interview in advance. He said that he thought he would be looking forward to it, Alice. In the present tense. The protagonist frowned and thought, wondering who would be kind enough to interview him, given all the bad rumors swirling around him. At that moment, Athena came up to him and asked if he was feeling unwell. He jumped in surprise and said that he was not. Not at all. He scratched the back of his head awkwardly and said that he was just admiring the beauty of the building. That's all. Find a bride from Ferris Jaw. He had heard that phrase before. It was normal for girls to choose a good knight from among those they barely knew. He grabbed his head and thought that he could give a terrible impression of him now. What if no one chose him? And this battlefield was a garden for girls? He turned around and started to walk away, deciding that he couldn't take another step. Was this probably defensive magic? At that moment, Alice came up to them and asked why he had fallen behind. She grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and heading towards the building, said that they needed to go. Athena, walking forward, told him to take a look. It was beautiful inside too. At that moment, the students of the Girls' Academy were paying attention to Alice. They were saying, "My God, it's Alice! Girls!" Alice came to see them. She smiled back and wished everyone a good day. They hadn't seen each other for a long time. The protagonist, looking at this, thought, as expected of the daughter of the Marchioness of Roses, one of the 4 most influential houses. Alice said that she had originally planned to enroll in Ferris Joe. The student asked who was accompanying her. She replied that it was her friend, Yuno, Asteroth, and Athena, the goddess who had recently made a contract with him. They looked at the protagonist with confusion, and then they surrounded Athena and started talking. So this is a beautiful girl goddess, Athena. She is so cute. She is much more beautiful than they say. They are happy to meet her, Athena. He looked at what was happening in surprise, and at that moment, Alice waved her hand at him and said that she was going to see someone. Good luck to him. After a while, the protagonist went inside the building. He walked along the corridor and thought that he should continue to improve Athena's reputation. While he was doing everything, he would talk to a few girls to improve his attitude. Then he saw 2 girls talking in the hallway and put his hand on his chest and said that he was glad to see them. "Milady, what a beautiful weather today." One of them wished him a good day. Aine, who was standing next to her, smiled and guessed that he must be from the Magic Knight Academy. It seemed that he was a first year like them. Was he looking for someone? He replied that he was not. He was just admiring the beauty of those he passed by. In response, they giggled, and he asked if the 2 of them had decided who they would talk to. Aine put her hand on her cheek and replied that it was not so. They had not decided yet, but if she seriously thought about it, she would choose Alice. But there would be quite a fierce fight for her. He thought, Alice is really popular. The student then said that she would choose Crime. He is probably the 2nd most popular after Alice, so the chances are slim. The protagonist thought, Crime? He doesn't know his family name, but he's sure he's from a good family. He then raised his index finger and smiled and said, "Then, what do they think of Yuno Asteroth?" They said that's impossible. She heard that he's quite the troublemaker, and she said that he's from a respectable family, and he's the worst offspring of the Asteroth family of all time. MC laughed awkwardly and said that Yuno wouldn't be easy. Aine clapped her hands and said, without saying it, "Can she know his name?" If he doesn't mind, she'd like to hear about him too, by the way. That's her name. But before she could finish speaking, they looked at the empty corridor in surprise and asked in bewilderment, "Did he leave?" Meanwhile, the protagonist walked away into the distance of the corridor and, clenching his teeth, thought, "Damn, he didn't know that he was hated so much." He sat down near the wall and, clutching his head, sighed heavily. He thought that he was really losing. At this rate, he definitely was. The next second, he heard a shout from the room behind him, shouting that she should say it again. Looking inside, he thought, was there a fight between the girls? One of the students called out. Even though she was the eldest daughter of the Marquise family, she was too rude. He thought, so this is the real world of these girls. It felt like he was seeing something he shouldn't. But he wondered, why should these three have an advantage over her? Luna calmly asked, why couldn't the three of them understand what she said? Then she would say it again. She put her hand to her face and told them to get out of her sight right now. The three of them were like an eyesore. The student said irritably, she was saying it again, she better prepare herself for the consequences. She folded her arms and replied that she really wanted to see what she would do. However, it was impossible if they gathered together like this, a caste circle, and what is this? The student smirked and declared that from now on, a world of pain awaited her. After that, her partner sat down on the floor and drew a magic circle with chalk. Luna, watching this, said the three of them, they understand what they are going to do, right? The student, folding her arms over her chest, smiled and asked, she did not expect this, right? Putting her pride on display, she had no idea that someone could teach her a lesson. The next second, monsters climbed out of the magic circle, and she added, after these demons disgraced her, she would regret that she was the first to offend them. Several demons headed towards her, and the students, heading for the exit, wished her a good day. The protagonist at this moment prepared to dash and thought that he should help. The next second, Luna looked at the monsters and seriously said, not a step closer, she will make sure that they regret if they disobey. They froze in fear, and the next second they jumped on her. She said, I see, they should take a good look. However, she won't let them do that as long as she's alive. With that, she took out the blade, but MC ran past her, snatching the blade from her hands. She looked at him and said, he's so sudden. But the next second, the protagonist attacked the demons and handed her the blade, wishing her a good day. He was just passing by. She took the weapon from his hands and put it in the sheath, saying that she thought she should thank him. He walked to the exit and said, no need, he'll go. She folded her arms across her chest and asked, isn't he going to introduce himself? He thought, this girl, her. Then he laughed and said that he wasn't worth her time. He thought that she reminded him of his sister. He remembered his sister saying that Yuno had a hidden talent. It would be a disgrace to the Asteroth family to expel him, who is the heir of the family. She would rather take her own life than live with such disgrace. If his sister had not done this back then, he would be living a carefree life now. Therefore, it is in his best interest not to get involved with this girl. His sixth sense tells him that he should get out of here quickly. He has already caused enough trouble for himself. But the next second, she introduced herself, Luna Flame. He turned around, looking at her, and she asked, what is it? Only he must not tell her that he will remain silent after she introduced herself. He put his hand to his chest and said that he is the second son of Count Byrne. His name is Maru Byrne. He bowed and added that it is an honor to meet her. After a while, the protagonist said, perhaps this is the magic of the barrier. Auditorium of St. Ferris Girls Academy, the introduction hall. For the past week, he has been visiting Ferris Academy in the hopes of finding a partner. Not a single girl had even greeted him, let alone approached him first. At that moment, Athena shouted enthusiastically, you shouldn't worry. She was sure there would be people here who understood how great he was. He shouldn't give up. He thought that her kindness would heal his broken heart. At that moment, he heard the voices of the female students asking Alice to be their knight. They surrounded her and shouted, could she please come with her for a minute? No way, she wouldn't let Alice fall into her hands. Athena said, all things considered, Alice was quite popular. MC said that she was the daughter of one of the most influential families and also the best in her class. If he were a student at this academy, he would choose her without hesitation. Alice then said that she was very sorry to each of them, but her heart was already taken by someone. She longed with all her heart to become this man's sword. Ever since she was a child, until now, she had always trained hard and worked hard to become stronger. The protagonist looked at her and thought, he didn't know this. Who would have thought that her heart was already taken by someone? The female student sighed desperately and said, so that's how it is. Alice then put her hand in front of her and continued, but if they were still looking for a partner, she could recommend her childhood friend, Yuno. The next second, the female student seemed to disappear, and Alice locked eyes with the protagonist. She smiled and gave him a thumbs up, and he thought, she should just give up. please stop. He then walked away and turned around to hear one of the female students put her hand to her mouth and said, "It seems like Crime and Alice have already chosen their partners." Her friend said, "This is starting to become problematic for her." He thought that there were those who were approached by more than one girl, and there were those like him who were ignored at all. He held his head and thought, could it be that he was the only one who was so pathetic? Then he noticed Maru, who was sitting alone at the table. He also noticed him and leaned his face on his hand and said, "Oh, could it be that no one has approached him, Yuno?" The protagonist asked. "Isn't he in the same situation?" He countered, "He shouldn't put him in the same league. It just so happens that he rejected a lot of girls recently. He shouldn't get it wrong. It's not like he's unpopular or anything." The protagonist thought, he's definitely lying, but how come no one has approached him? It's impossible. Then he said, okay, he shouldn't worry so much. Special help will be provided for people like him. MC was surprised. Help? He confirmed it. If the introduction failed, he would be paired with someone who also failed to find a partner. This system was designed for losers like him who didn't have a princess of their own to graduate. He was lucky. Loser. He said, "I see," and then clutched his head and thought, that still doesn't change the fact that he is an unsold commodity. If it was just him, he wouldn't care about the gossip. But what does everyone think of Athena, who made a contract with someone like him? He doesn't want to cause her so much trouble. Then he said, "Wait, Athena?" Suddenly, he heard her shout, "Please, will one of them be Yuno's princess?" She was addressing a group of girls and saying, "He is very kind, strong, and really cool." He looked at her in confusion and thought, she is trying so hard for him. So what does he have to be afraid of? Then he walked to the center of the room and, putting his hand to his chest, declared, anyone must become his princess. He, Yuno, from the Asteroth house. He asks to be allowed to protect them. Athena looked at him sheepishly and added, "Please, they must choose him." At that moment, Ain approached him and asked him sheepishly, did he remember her? He remembered and said that he was very sorry for disappearing so abruptly back then. She smiled and replied that everything was fine, she should be the one apologizing for what she said. He countered, "No need. She didn't need to worry about it." She replied that she was glad that he forgave her for that. She asked him to let her introduce herself. Her name is Einstadt, he can just call her Ein. He thought, so that's how it is. So far everything is going smoothly. Then he said, well, if he is not mistaken. He knelt down and thought that she chose him as her knight. He said as his knight, but the next second, the door to the room opened and everyone turned around in surprise. The girls were talking among themselves. It couldn't be. The lonely crescent moon had come? The protagonist looked at her and remembered how she introduced herself. He was surprised. Who was the lonely crescent moon? Ian was surprised. He didn't know anything? He replied that it wasn't like that. He only knew her name, but he wondered why there was such a fuss around her. She replied that she was the daughter of one of the 4 most influential families, the daughter of Marquise Flame, Luna Flame. It was unthinkable that she would come here. He asked why? She replied that from the very first day of training, she had made it clear that she would not participate in this event to find her knight. He thought, the lonely crescent moon was also known as Lone Moon. The next second, Alice knelt down in front of her and said, "How long has it been, Luna?" Crime also knelt down in front of her and said that it was an honor to meet her. His name was Crime Elrode, the rightful heir of the Elrode Earl House. Ein exclaimed in confusion. Both of them approached her? Could it be that he was the one they wanted to dedicate their lives to? MC thought, part of the Rose family, one of the 4 great families. He was not surprised. Most likely it was her family's will. And Crime, he had heard a lot about him. The Elrode House is very famous for its valor, just like the Asteroth House. Given his appearance, it is no wonder why he is so popular. Then Alice said how long ago it was. She replied, the fact that she came here. Perhaps she changed her mind? She replied that it is not so. She still wants to be alone. But in any case, this place has rules and a necessary condition for becoming an independent knight. She does not want a knight to be chosen for her by God knows who. She is sure that it will be better if she makes a choice on her own. Alice put her hand on her chest and asked to be allowed to accompany her in that case. As she promised, she trained hard. No one but her could handle her. Crime also put his hand on his chest and said that he couldn't ignore what she said. Alice, his name is Crime. Luna said yes, she had heard such rumors. Alice, she had heard that she had become better in class. Yes, that was an achievement. But still, she was so sure that she was stronger than everyone present? She was surprised. What did she mean? She replied, truly strong people don't shout about it at every step. Alice asked, then who did she think was the strongest here? She replied, Maru Bang. The people present were surprised and she asked, is he in her class? Isn't he? At that moment, Maru pointed at himself in confusion and was surprised. Is he? Luna told him to come, and he rose from his seat and looking at the protagonist, laughed and said, what did he tell him? After that, he came to her and putting his hand to his chest, said that he had come as she asked. It was he. Maru, the second son of Earl Byrne. Those present looked at him in surprise while he smiled. Then Luna asked who he was. He was surprised. What? Alice pointed at him with her hand and said his name, and she thoughtfully said, I see, so that's how it is. Alice, is there a student with black hair here? He is quite attractive, but his eyes were clouded with a perverted expression. She repeated, black hair, perverted, is that really it? She turned to the protagonist, who was trying his best to pretend that he was not there, and Luna said that it was him, she should bring him to her. The next second, Alice dragged him by the scruff of the neck and said that this was Yuno Astario. She replied, and he was quite popular, she would give him a chance to become her knight. Maru indignantly clenched his fist and shouted at her to wait a minute. What was the meaning of all this? She was surprised. Is he still here? He is free. He can go. Alice put her hand to her chest and shouted, why did she choose him and not her? She winked and replied that it was actually very simple. She just really liked him. Maru pointed at him and shouted, with all due respect, he is sure this is a mistake. He is the third son of the infamous Astario house. Doesn't she know? She thoughtfully added, and the man who was rumored to have caused a bloodbath during the training battles, his name is also Yuno, isn't he? He indignantly replied, it's all only because he is a newbie who made a contract with a god. This guy is only able to use the spear art that the god gave him. The protagonist thought that he had already told him that this story was greatly exaggerated. Maru added, without spear art, he was just an incompetent who couldn't use a sword or magic. Luna replied, I see, quite an interesting story. The protagonist mentally told his classmate to shut up, and she continued, he means that if she gave him a dagger, he wouldn't be able to use it? He shouted, that's right. He wouldn't be able to defeat even a goblin, because his spear art wouldn't work without a long handle on the weapon. She laughed and said, is that so intriguing, isn't it? Well, now you know. She is eagerly awaiting his answer. He thought, this smell of nobility and magnificence emanating from her is refreshing, but he won't let it intoxicate him. After all, she is very similar to his older sister. He doesn't think being her knight is a good idea, but what else can he do? Turning around, he looked at Athena and thought that this might be his last chance. He then walked up to Athena and pointed at her and said that he sincerely apologized Luna, but he had already decided to become this beautiful lady's knight. She was surprised. He sheepishly whispered an apology to her, but he was asking her to talk to her for him. She thought that everything was fine. Let's go. She then bowed and wished her a good day and said that she was the one who decided to become Yuno's partner. It was nice to meet her. MC was surprised to see how she had changed. Luna said that she couldn't remember her. What class was she from? First or second? She smiled sheepishly and replied that she was from first class. Luna asked if that was true. How strange, they only have flower, bird, wind, and moon class. The protagonist desperately knelt down and she told him to just give up. You shouldn't put your family at risk by making a fool of yourself. The student started whispering. He was too rude to her. How tactless. He thought that he couldn't ruin his reputation anymore. It seemed that it couldn't be helped. Athena extended her hands to him and apologized for not being able to help here. But she was so glad that he was able to find someone. Luna would be a wonderful princess. He said that he hoped if everything Alice said. Alice then walked up to Luna and said she had to tell her one last time. Did she really think that Yuno was stronger than her? The protagonist said her name and she replied that she might never know, but as for her, she didn't believe that this man was incompetent in everything. She said, that's it. MC looked at her and thought, Alice, why did she decide to join the Magic Knight Academy? He never thought that it was all for the sake of fulfilling the promise she made to Luna. Then Alice turned around and said, well, she never thought that he would become the Knight of Luna. If he were to harm her in any way, he would be forced to deal with her. He thought, but she was still his good friend. She added, he must swear an oath. After that, he knelt down on one knee and uttered, he, Yuno Astario, the third son of the Astario family. From this day on, he becomes the Sword of Luna Flame and swears to protect her. She laughed lightly and said that she definitely will not disappoint him, After a while, the head of the Argos Flame Duchy told the protagonist to leave. He bowed and said that in that case, he begs for forgiveness. He headed for the exit, but Luna told him to wait. Then, turning to her father, she asked, isn't this what he asked of her? She chose a knight for herself. He insisted on it so much. Any will do. Isn't that his word? He responded with irritation when he said, anyone, why of all people did she settle on the incompetent Dom Astario? He shouted that he heard that even his own father, a former sword saint, had abandoned him. Although he was born into a house of military prowess that had produced many sword saints, but this disgrace couldn't handle a sword or magic, he highly doubted that he could handle the role of her knight. She replied, Father, Yuno was the one who saved her life. How dare he insult the one who saved her life and call him incompetent? He asked, is this the person she owes a debt to? she should spare him from this lie. The protagonist awkwardly looked away and thought that he hoped that he could go home after all this. Luna then said that Yuno was actually blessed with the art of the spear after making a contract with the goddess Athena. And thanks to that, he caused a bloodbath of his classmates in a mock battle. He thought that he didn't do that. Argos frowned and said he doesn't even know what to believe. Is what she says true or just a local joke among the students? As for Athena, she must be referring to the lost goddess who was branded as incompetent and couldn't make a pact with anyone for 12 years? How much more wisdom will he hear from her today? Everything she tells him, he thinks is just a stupid joke. As soon as he made a contract with the forgotten goddess, he immediately put an end to his future. He slammed his fists on the table and added, he did a pretty good job of winning the favor of his daughter, but he will never allow him to become her knight. He wants him to leave this place immediately. The protagonist said with all due respect, as he said, he's just a young man, but even so, he is sure that his spear skills are unmatched. Would he agree to participate in a duel with him? He is confident that his skills will not disappoint him. Luna folded her arms and remarked that this was a great idea. She was giving him her permission to finish him off. Argos leaned his hands on the table and said, he is testing his patience. Very good. He must let him test whether he is able or not to protect his daughter's life. But he will not fight him. It will be his weakest servant. If he can defeat him, then he will recognize him as his daughter's knight. Luna asked, the weakest? And the father of the family told him to follow him. After a while, they went outside, and MC took a spear in his hands. Luna, turning to him, said, if he was interested, she is not sure that it will be easy for him to defeat his opponent. He thought that he was not sure. His sixth sense told him that she did not doubt his true strength. Then he said, of course, mistress, he will definitely win. He thought, for the honor of his goddess. At that moment, his opponent approached them and apologized for keeping them waiting. He put his hand on his chest and bowed, adding that it was a great honor for him to be his partner in this duel. His name was Claude. The protagonist was surprised. The butler? And he added that when he learned that the lady had chosen a knight for herself, he was completely delighted. She had finally found someone she could rely on, and that person was him. The protagonist awkwardly agreed with him and thought that he did not want to fight this old man seriously because he did not know what consequences it would lead to. Then Claude said, Mr. Argos, is he completely sure of this? He took off his monocle, and the father of the family told him to prove that he was capable. Then Luna turned to the protagonist and said that she wanted him to take this fight seriously. He thought, what was this even about? Argos said that they would begin at his signal. He thought, this feeling of awkwardness. Claude asked to let him give him advice if he thought he was just an old bag of bones. The next second, Argos shouted, start! Claude pushed off the ground, rising into the air behind the protagonist, and swung his sword, adding, he was very wrong. The protagonist, turning around, thought that he had simply disappeared. The next second, a sword flew past his face, but he managed to dodge, and their gazes crossed, and he blocked the attack, holding his spear in front of him. His hands were shaking from the tension, and he asked, and he is the weakest? Argos was surprised. This is impossible, to be able to block such an attack. At that moment, MC thought that he was right. He underestimated him. At that moment, his opponent appeared behind him. He thought it was time to get a little serious. After that, he turned around sharply, pointing his weapon at the enemy. But he put his sword in front of him and, sighing, swung it, then repeated his strike, but the protagonist blocked his attack, putting the tip of his spear in front of his sword. Claude said, who is he? Who is the fool who called him incompetent? He replied that he did not know. He wanted to ask him the same thing, who called him the weakest. The next second, Argos waved his fist and shouted, Claude, he must end his games. He must hurry and finish him off. Luna said that they should be a little slower. She can't keep up with them. At that moment, Claude landed in front of the protagonist, and noticed that now they both will have a hard time. He agreed with him and, looking at his hand, thought, but will he be able to continue? He even became a little more serious. Then Claude resolutely ran towards him and shouted, here he is. MC thought that he would do better next time. He then swung his spear in front of him, but his opponent was behind him again and kicked him. The protagonist staggered, and then another kick flew at him, sending him flying to the ground. He thought that maybe he could get a little more serious with him. The next second, Argos folded his arms, laughed loudly, and said, well done, Claude. That was a really long match. The protagonist raised his hand to the sky at that moment, and thought that he didn't really know what he was capable of. He might be able to control power to the limit, but he still didn't know how to use it properly. From the training battles to the goblins, he had never fought even a quarter of his strength until now. And that was enough. But this time, to what extent could he be serious with this person? After that, Luna stood up from her seat and said to her father that this duel was not over yet, She approached the main character and said that she didn't hate his thoughtless and crazy side. On the contrary, she liked it. But even so, he must remember that he is the knight she chose. That means he cannot lose until she gives him permission to do so. Have they made that clear? He closed his eyes and thought that this was the most absurd reason there could be. But strangely enough, it was enough. Then she added that if he understood her, then he should finish resting and get up faster. He opened his eyes in surprise and looked at her. And she said that she knew he could win, Yuno. The next second, he stood up and covered his mouth with his hand, thinking that it was unfair to use such an expression. If only she could stay like this forever. And then he looked after her and said, how quickly she changed. Turning around, she began to leave in the right direction, but also wondered, what was he talking about? Then he scratched the back of his head and thought that he even thought for a second that he would not have to get up anymore. Then Argos shouted, Claude, he is not serious about his task. In response, he asked him to be silent. This time he should not expect mercy. Since his master is eager for his victory, he prepared the weapon in his hands. The protagonist, grabbing the spear again, said, what a coincidence. The lady also wants him to win. Claude said one last piece of advice. He better not take his eyes off him. He closed his eyes and said, well, he thought, okay, maybe try to launch it. He, smiling, told him to just try to dodge. Claude looked at the spear flying at him in bewilderment and stepped aside. The spear flew far ahead with such force that it made a hole in the ground and in the forest in the distance. Argos screamed in shock. Claude bowed and said that he lost. At that moment, Argos fell to his knees and said desperately, this can't be. Has Claude lost to him? MC looked at him with a smile and thought that he hoped that he would not dare to say anything bad to the goddess again. Then Luna said that he can be proud of himself. He just defeated her father's only knight. He said, her father's only knight? He called him the weakest? She explained that, in truth, he used to be the head of the royal knights. The protagonist, perplexed, shouted, what? And she added, compared to the previous saints, it was said that he was equal in strength to them, including his father. He was surprised, including his father? Then why is he nicknamed the weakest? If the lady knew, then why did she hide it from him? She smiled and said, wouldn't it be too boring in that case? This was a great chance to find out his true strength. She would never let him make excuses for losing. He thought, my God, this girl is really cunning. Then she turned to her father and asked if he was sure of her choice now. He glanced at her out of the corner of his eye and said that she could do whatever she wanted. And so their day began. He officially became the Knight of Luna. After that, she looked at the protagonist and said, after all this, is he unhappy? He thought that at first he was instinctively wary of her, but being the knight of the daughter of a famous noble family, perhaps this is a good arrangement for him and the goddess. He thinks that now he will be able to spend much more time with her. He answered sheepishly, of course he is happy. She asked, and what does he think of her? He shouted that she is beautiful and charming, both outside and inside. She smiled, put her hand to her chin and answered, very well. Then he should let her show him his room. He should follow her. He answered, yes, sir, his mistress. Then he asked in surprise, what? What did she just say? She folded her arms across her chest and explained that from this day on, he would be living here. He was her knight? Wasn't that logical? After a while, the protagonist entered the manor. Luna's younger sister, Alice, came up to him and looked at him and asked what his name was. He smiled, put his hand to his chest and said that he was pleased to meet her. He introduced himself and said that he was Luna's knight. He thought, who was she? She smiled and said, so he was her older sister's protector? He must be joking. He thought awkwardly, so this is her younger sister, just like her, only smaller. Speaking of Luna, she's been delayed for a while. Her father officially appointed him as her knight, and from today on, he will have to live with her family in this manner. She told him to wait for her return in this room, but she's still not here. It looked like she was going to find her sister. He hoped they wouldn't miss each other. Then Alice laughed and he thought, is she still laughing? She was cute. There must have been a time when Luna looked like that too. Then he sat down at the table, and she put her glass on the table in front of him and apologized for the wait. He thought, so little, and already she knows how to behave. After that, he thanked her and thought, even he had never had to do this. After that, she sat down on his lap, and he looked at her, confused. Turning around, she said, brother, she feels a little strange. He was surprised. Strange? She answered that she did, but she was not afraid of him at all. He looked at her in surprise and thought that he did not remember being told that he could scare anyone. Then she thought, oh, that's how it is. It's about time. She stood up and held out her hands to him. He looked at her in surprise. She told him to lift her up. He was surprised and thought, lift her up. Then he lifted her above himself and said, hi, is that normal? She screamed happily and he thought he understood everything correctly. Then she stretched out her arms to him and told him to hug her tightly now. He was surprised again and answered that he would not do that. She objected, he should hug her. He answered that she should not misunderstand him, but if he did something wrong, he would be kicked out of here. He thought, well, by the way, he was much older than her, so she should forgive him, Luna's sister. Then she put her index finger to her face and said if he did not hurry up, she would tell her sister something. She would say that he liked little girls like her better. After that, he let her go to her feet and immediately hugged her. He thought, oh shit, what is she doing? She giggled contentedly and he asked, is she happy now? She replied that it was not so, and he thought that she should give him a break if Luna saw him in such a state. Then, the next second Luna entered the room, and he, stepping back, said that it was not about that. Before he could finish speaking, Alice ran to her sister and shouted that she was so scared. The protagonist said awkwardly, but it was not so. After that, she turned her attention to the glass and asked if she brought it to him. He replied that it was so. After that, she stroked her sister's hair and said, I understand. She's good, Alice. MC looked at her in surprise, and then Luna asked her sister if she remembered to introduce herself. She replied that she had not yet had time. The sister said that she should have done it without reminders. She confirmed this. After that, she lifted the hem of her dress and, bowing, introduced herself. She asked to love and favor. The protagonist thought that she wouldn't fool him again. Alice hugged her sister again, and she said that she should calm down. She seemed to guess what she wanted to do. And yet she was surprised. She was usually very shy around strangers. She ran away even when their father tried to approach her. They sat down on the sofas. The protagonist thought, wow, even with her father she behaved like a stranger. Who does she see him as? Then he said, and yet, mistress, why did she tell him to wait for her here? She looked into the hallway, peeking out from behind the door, and answered, she can come at any time. But first, the next second, Athena peeked out from behind the door, and MC was happy to see her. She also smiled shyly and said his name. The next second, Alice ran to hug the goddess and shouted, she is so beautiful, and her skin is so smooth, and her hair is so silky. Goddess Athena awkwardly said that she was ticklish. Then Luna said, besides, they were just preparing a room for her. The protagonist, surprised, looked at her and asked, will she stay with them? She asked, doesn't he want to? He looked at her embarrassedly and replied that it was not so. On the contrary, he was very grateful. And she asked, isn't it because of her? Isn't it because of Athena? He replied that it was all true. At that moment, the door to the room opened, and the mother of the family, Charlotte, entered the room. She said, hey, is this boy Mrs. Luna's knight? MC looked at her in surprise, and Luna confirmed that it was him. His face turned red from embarrassment, and then he bowed to her and introduced himself, saying that it was nice to meet her. She replied that she was Lord Flame's wife, Charlotte, but he could just call her Charlie. He thought, oh shit, I was staring at such a beauty. Then she said that she heard that her husband had been giving him trouble. He put his hands in front of him in confusion and replied that it was not so. And she added, smiling, that she would talk to him later, but for now she asked him to forgive him. The protagonist thought, it seems that now he is beginning to understand who is the boss in their family. Then Charlotte said that, to be honest, she thought that she would never find herself a knight. Her daughter sat next to her and asked, is it such a big deal? She laughed and replied that it was not so. Oh, what is she? She was just a little surprised. That's all. At that moment, Alice pointed her finger at the protagonist and shouted, sister, that's not fair. She wants one too. She replied that she can't. He already belongs to her. The next second, Alice ran to the protagonist and grabbing his leg, shouted that she liked him too. He thought it was cute and then shook his head and thought that it was not so. Then Athena told Alice to stop. No wonder she liked him. After all, Luna chose him. Charlotte said, and indeed, she had long wondered if she was the Athena rumored to be there. She stood up from her seat and bowed, confirming it, then introduced herself and said that it was nice to meet her. The protagonist looked at her and thought that she was cute. After that, Charlotte put her hands to her cheeks and said that she was really very beautiful, just like Luna said. Seeing her, her goddess would be surprised too. She thanked her for such words. Then the protagonist asked her goddess, does that mean that she also made a deal, Mrs. Charlotte? She answered that it was true. She made it with Asteroth, the goddess of love and beauty. He smiled, so with Asteroth then. He thought, just seeing her, he immediately realized that she was an unusual person. Making a deal with such a famous deity is amazing. The goddess of love and beauty Asteroth. There is no person who does not know her name. Even he has heard of her, and he should know about it. After that, he lowered his gaze and looked in surprise at Athena's shaking hands. He asked, is everything okay? The others also looked at her in surprise, and she suddenly said that she was scared. The next second, a gap in space appeared between them, and he, perplexed, asked, what? After that, he put his hand back and shouted, everyone back. He covered his face with his hand and thought, is there magic here? No, it can't be. It's unlikely that this is something good. After that, he saw Asteroth begin to crawl out of the rift, who said, what the hell? What were they talking about here? The mother of the family, hugging her daughters with a smile, said, Mrs. Asteroth, and she smiled and greeted everyone. The protagonist put his hand in front of him and thought, what the hell? This ominous force? Charlotte, hugging her daughters, was happy to see the goddess, and she, descending from the rift, noticed that they had not seen each other for a long time. Waving her hand, she asked if she had been well all this time. She answered that it had really been a long time. As far as she remembered, about 3 years had passed since their last meeting. The goddess was surprised. Wow, has it really been that long? MC thought, so this is Asteroth, the goddess of love and beauty. Charlotte said that she already thought that she would never come to visit her. She answered that this is impossible. She said that she is special to her. The protagonist thought, and what exactly surprised him so? He sat down next to Athena and said that everything is fine. This is the goddess of love and beauty, Asteroth. Her body began to tremble, and at that moment, Asteroth leaned towards them, and looking at Athena, asked who she is. Their gazes met. She wanted to answer, but Charlotte said, it's the goddess Athena. Asteroth looked at her and asked, Athena, isn't she a wandering god? So who gave her the name Athena? The protagonist said it was him. She walked up to him and smiled and said, I see. So it was him, so why did he give her that name? He said he didn't know, and she thought about it. She put her hand on his shoulder and said, then more thing, who is that inside him? He looked at her in surprise, and then hesitantly answered that it was himself inside him. She looked to the side and turning away said, I think so. The protagonist looked at her in surprise and thought, what is this goddess trying to achieve? What is she talking about? Then she put her hand out to her side and turning around said, what about this? How boring. She sent a powerful pulse of energy forward, but MC blocked it with his foot and thought that he would have to use force. A powerful beam of light came out of the window in the room. The goddess looked at it in confusion, and Charlotte ran up to her and shouted, why did she do that? The protagonist at that moment stood in front of Athena and covered her with his hand. Asteroth laughed and said, wonderful, he passed. Charlotte asked, what did he pass? She answered, nothing surprising, this boy, is he now her daughter's knight? She was not sure if he was suitable for this role, so she came to check him out herself. Charlotte put her hand to her chest and, lowering her gaze, said, so that's why she is here. The goddess put her hand on her shoulder and said, she chose a really wonderful knight, didn't she? She has a diamond eye for people. It's a great honor. In that case, that's all. She asked, is she leaving so soon? The goddess walked up to the rift and waved her hand, apologizing to Charlotte and explaining that she had a few more places to stop by after their meeting. Until next time, Yuno. After that, she disappeared into the rift and MC sighed. He thought that when he saw her, a strange bad feeling came over him. Now he felt like a complete idiot because of it. The next second, Athena apologized to him for making him worry. He turned to her and smiled, saying that everything was fine. Was she feeling okay? He thought that the goddess Asteroth was just worried about her ward and her daughter, that's all. She replied that everything was fine, and he knelt down next to her and said, once, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He thought, because there is no excuse for such an absurd thought as this. He remembered how the goddess had said goodbye to him, and thought it was impossible that she wasn't actually a divine being. Meanwhile, Lucifer was sitting in his chair, resting his face on his fist, saying how boring it was. At that moment, a rift appeared next to him, and Asteroth asked, still with the same gloomy and irritated expression as always, he asked, what did she want? She jumped out of the rift and answered, well, anyway, the divine lands are so far away, what other reason is there for him to sit here all alone? But she shook her head and added, if she were in his place, she would be very bored, she would die of boredom. He said that he asked her a question. She answered that she wanted to ask something. The wandering gods, who are they? She knows that they are nameless and gods born in the lower heavens around the same time as them, but is there information that he is keeping from her? She looked him in the eye and then spread her arms at her sides and said, he should be ashamed of himself for keeping her in the dark. She has been bored out of her mind ever since she came here. He is bored too, isn't he? She spread her arms out in front of her and shouted, even though she has become so famous in this world and achieved everything possible, it is still not enough for him. Isn't it? She too. They are much stronger. In a world where no one even thinks of competing with them, they will inevitably be bored. She almost lost her mind just thinking about it. So what should they do, Lucifer? He replied, enough, silence. But the next second, she put her hand forward and sent out a powerful blast of energy, but Lucifer easily grabbed it with his hand, and she cried out as she expected, he really does have this. The next second, he returned the powerful impulse to her, and she flew into the wall, covering the wall with cracks. She wiped her cheek and said, don't ruin a woman's face like that, he has a disgusting character. Did he know that? He stood in front of her and asked what happened in the upper world. She answered thoughtfully, nothing special. Then he turned around and she sighed and added, oh my god, she is absolutely no match for him, the highest god. Or would he like another name better? The Lord of Hell Lucifer? He disappeared and she sank to the ground and waved her hand and said, Here he is gone. Well, it seems there is nothing wrong with looking for answers on your own, right? After that, she drew a circle in front of her, and seeing the main character there, said that she found an interesting toy to have fun. He will not get anything, Lucifer. She was a little surprised that there was a person who could repel her attacks. Yuno, she has high hopes for him. Okay? Earlier, the protagonist was rummaging through books and said, "Here too. There's nothing in this book either." He remembers pretty clearly that the old man called himself Zeus, right? He doesn't think he's a wandering god. The next second, his body emitted a powerful energy and he grabbed his chest. After that, he sighed and thought that everything had calmed down. In any case, this was the least of his problems. He was born with a power beyond human control. That was the most serious problem. He remembered how God congratulated him on his birth. Then he tried to explain to his mother that there was some scary old man here. He waved his arms from side to side, and his mother said, "What an energetic child." Everyone smiled and told him not to be afraid. He wouldn't eat him. He thought, really? God confirmed it, but if he could, he would do it as a favor. He wants to make a pact. MC was surprised. A pact? He replied that other than giving him his power, he would have no restrictions. How about him? He was surprised. For free? He replied, of course for free. He thought, by any means necessary then. It seemed he was rude then, but there was no point in regretting it now. The only thing that bothered him, however. Then the god introduced himself. His name was Zeus. There was no need to address him like that. Then he would leave the rest to him. The protagonist thought. Why did the old man have such a sad expression on his face that day? At that moment, Maru Asteroth, his father, entered the room and asked what he was doing. It was high time to start training. He stood up and apologized to his father. He was just looking up something in the books. He replied that he had no magical abilities, and he refused to train with a sword. Why couldn't he do at least something? Put the books away and said that he would go to the training hall right away. As he made his way forward, he grabbed the wall and thought, incompetence, a mistake, a disgrace. He didn't care what others said about him. He didn't have the strength to pay attention to it. After a while, Ray, his sister, swung her sword at him and noticed that he had good reactions. He asked if she could stop pretending to be a knight. She was surprised. Why? He smiled awkwardly and replied, as the youngest candidate for the Holy Sword, the entire kingdom had high hopes for her. It would be better for her to devote her time to her own training instead of wasting it on him. He thought, it's not that he doesn't like it, it's just that he loses control of his power due to sudden attacks. She said seriously, you know. After that, she put her hands on his shoulders and asked if it was because he suddenly hated his older sister. He was surprised, and then replied that it wasn't like that. That's not what he meant. She swung her sword again and smiled and said, I see, then he better get ready for the next round. He asked, didn't she hear what he was just saying? She swung her sword again and shouted, will he dodge now? She noticed that he was doing great. He was counting her every move this time. He sighed, pressing his hands to his chest. His energy was bursting out, and at that moment, his sister turned away with a smile and said, as all older sisters say, without a doubt, he has a hidden talent. He thought that everything was bad. His power was bursting out, and she continued, he should not worry about what his father and other people said about him. The protagonist thought that he should hold it in. She added that he would make an excellent knight in the future. He put his hand forward and wanted to call her. Powerful energy was already bursting out of his hand, and Ray continued, in any case, he is her pride and joy. But the next second he shouted, sister. A powerful pulse of energy flew at her. She looked in surprise, but the next second he ran in front of her and pointing his hands forward, deflected his own blow. She knelt down and, perplexed, asked what was that? He asked if she was hurt, and she asked, did he do this to protect his older sister? She hugged him and shouted words of gratitude. He thought that he had just become a terrible example of a self-made man. After a while, Ray entered the room and shouted indignantly, Father, are you serious? What, talk about banishing Yuno from the family? Father stated that he had decided so. They have no place for such a talentless person. There will be no such person in the Asteroth family. MC thought, banishment from the house? He had been waiting for this moment for many years. The uncontrolled power he possessed could bring great destruction. He cannot exist with the others, being a walking threat. Although he feels bad about how he treated his sister when she took such good care of him, once he leaves this house, he will enjoy a quiet life somewhere far away. Father then asked Ray, what is she doing? She held the sword in front of her and said that Yuno has a hidden talent. To banish Yuno, who would bring glory to their house, is a true disgrace to the Asteroth family. She would rather give up her life than live with such shame. Father beat his chest and shouted. He also didn't believe that he could be so talentless. He took her word for it, and this is what happened. All his efforts bore no fruit, because he doesn't even try. So no matter what she says, he has no chance of developing further. And with the way things are going, it will be difficult to enroll him in Ferris Magic Knight Academy. which has been attended by members of this family for generations. She is telling him that she wants to pass on the legacy to such an ungrateful person? Ray asked calmly. So if Yuno enters the academy, his banishment will end? The protagonist looked at her in surprise and asked her to wait, and she said if he did not do it and tarnish their family's name, then she swears on their family's name that she will pay for it with her life. Father noticed that she said it herself. Since she swore on the family's name, he will not be merciful. The protagonist extended his hand to her and shouted, "Big sister." He really appreciates that she has come this far, but... She then held out the document and said that she is serious, father. MC thought, why was his future decided for him? He would not lie if he said that he did not want to study at Ferris Academy. He should protest here and now. He then shouted, "Sister, he does not agree with this." In the present tense, he stood up on his bed and shouted that he wants to live the way he wants. He then looked out the window and asked, "Is it morning already?" After that, he sank down on the pillow and thought, a comfortable bed and a spacious room. Everything is so different from the Asteroth estate. Until today, he had encountered many problems. It had been a few days since he became a knight, and he had been able to live a relatively peaceful life in the Flame family mansion for these days. The size of the Asteroth mansion was not comparable to the Flame mansion, but he felt fine in his own room. It wasn't that bad. Even the road to the academy from the Flame mansion was more convenient than from Asteroth. He was grateful for this to Duke Flame, who lived in the same city where the academy was located, in the royal capital. Moreover, he was incredibly happy because Athena lived in the next room. Previously, they could only see each other at the academy, but now he was in a place where he could see her whenever he wanted. He also learned that Athena didn't need sleep or food at all. He came to her room, and she, sitting on the bed, happily turned her attention to him, adding that this bed was so soft and fluffy. He thought she was so cute. Then she held the plate of food in her hands and asked, "What is the name of this amazing dish?" He thought again, how cute she is. He was lying in his bed and thinking, it seems that Athena is enjoying life outside the academy for the first time. Then he said that he is very grateful to Luna. Well, everything would be just perfect if not for one little thing. Alice was sleeping next to him and said, "Brother." He thought, after all, she really is cute. However, until she wakes up, it is time to get up. He got up and went to the closet. Alice, having woken up, asked, "Is he leaving already?" He answered that it was time for him to go to the academy, and his room became Alice's playground, in which he could not be alone. She embarrassedly asked, "Does Yuno care more about his sister than about her?" He thought that she was cute. She was not. He knelt down in front of the bed on one knee and putting his hand to his chest, said that he cares for both of them equally. Of course he thinks highly of her. She asked, "Does he?" He confirmed it, and she asked, "Does that mean he loves her?" He understood her purpose and answered, "Yes." She said, "It doesn't count until he says it himself." The moment he poured out his soul, this devil with an angelic face, she asked, "Does he love her?" He answered, "He loves her," or... For him, it was already over. She waved her hands joyfully. He asked, "What about her?" And suddenly from all corners of the estate he could hear, "He cares for her. Alice. He loves her. Alice." The father of the family sat in the yard, irritated, clenching his teeth. Claude stood next to him and said, "Wow, what exquisite sound magic." He dares to assume that this is why Alice is called a little genius, right? He slammed his fist on the table, and then burst into the protagonist's room and shouted, "He's an idiot! What is he doing here with his daughter?" He thought that he could no longer live in this family. He screamed, unleashing his poisonous fangs not only on Luna, but also on Alice. "He better get ready, kid." He began to take out his weapon from its sheath, and the protagonist mentally called for Athena to help. The next second, she looked out of the window, and he was glad to see her. The father of the family asked, "Didn't he tell him to prepare for death?" The protagonist thought that only one person could get him out of this situation. The next second, the door to the room swung open and Luna walked in. Then she turned around and said that it was time for them to go. Before entering the MC Academy, he never thought that he would be so eager to attend classes. Now this is his ordinary life, another ordinary day. After some time, they arrived at the academy, and those present paid attention to Luna. Today she is more beautiful than ever. The eldest daughter of Duke Flame, one of the 4 noble families, entered Ferris Academy with the highest score. Since then, she has attracted a lot of attention with her incredible aura and beauty. In a way, she has become the queen of Ferris. When she appears on the horizon, there is a lot of noise and hubbub around. The protagonist, looking away, thought it reminds him of the bustle of servants around the mistress. However, behind closed doors, she is often mocked by envious women. He remembered the 3 girls and thought, the constant mockery and ridicule. He can bet that she pays a heavy price for all this popularity. At that moment, Athena came up to him and said that she felt like people were staring at her more than usual. He smiled and said that she should take a closer look at their faces. They are not staring at her, but looking with real adoration. She looked at them shyly and said, "There was a mistake. She's just not used to this kind of attention. MC laughed and said, "There is nothing wrong with looking a little proud. Just like Luna over there." And by the way, the unpleasant glances were most likely directed at him. Perhaps it was his fault in the first place. The student asked if it was a mistake that of all the knights, he was the one who protected Luna. Was he blackmailing her? Well, becoming Luna's knight would help him gain respect in the eyes of others, but it was not that easy. Then he called Luna and said that it was time for him to go. She replied, of course, she would wait for him here. He walked on and thought, despite his reputation, the name of the goddess Athena was becoming more and more famous, and he was sure that his decision that day was not a mistake. After a while, Athena said that it was time for her to go to prayer. The protagonist agreed with her and said that they would meet later. Then he turned his attention to Alice and Ayn, talking to each other. When he took his seat, Alice sat down next to him and wished them good morning. He reciprocated, and she said, she understood that Luna was doing well? He answered, more or less. She closed her eyes and said, I see. The protagonist noticed that they got along well with Ayn. He had seen her together earlier and was very surprised when he learned that she chose Ayn in the selection. She replied that she was her knight, wasn't she? He, apologizing, noted that she was right, and then asked, so they knew Ayn? She replied that she didn't. She had met her for the first time in the selection. The protagonist looked out the window, and she thought that she couldn't say she was surprised. Ayn was so cute. No wonder he had fallen for her. At that moment, Soleil entered the classroom and told everyone to take their seats. He held up a piece of paper and said, keep it up. He will now begin collecting their consent forms to participate in the training camp in Ferris. Starting from the back, they should hand it to him. MC asked in surprise, a training camp? Alice said, well, he knows, the one where the deadline is today. After that, the protagonist took out a crumpled piece of paper from his desk, and a student told him to give it here. He sighed and asked Alice, are they going with Ayn too? She confirmed it, and he signed the piece of paper, saying that in that case, he was in too. She told him to wait. He signs this without even discussing it with Luna? He was surprised. Isn't this some kind of sleepover? If they were going there, then Luna. Before he could finish speaking, she said that she didn't know what kind of fun he was thinking of, but this camp was an additional discipline, where you need to survive 3 days and 2 nights in the forest of magical creatures. After that, he got up from his seat and ran to the teacher, shouting that he changed his mind. Soleil turned around and asked, changed his mind what? It seems he gave more than enough time to discuss it. It's not like he was listening to everything again, is it? After that, he said that he could forget what he said. After a while, he sat at the table and said that he was very sorry to put this on her. Luna, looking away, said that in principle she was not against it. She was going to participate anyway. He was surprised while Alice stretched his cheeks, and Luna said that trying to survive 3 days and 3 nights in the forest of magical creatures is something like a normal camping, right? Personally, she has never been to camp before. She is really looking forward to this event. The protagonist spread his arms out to the sides and said, of course, but he's worried that it seems too difficult for her, especially considering her lack of experience. It is also said that half of the participants are from Ferris. Alice laughed loudly. Her older sister told her to calm down. She has a very serious conversation with Yuno. She can play with him later. She asked, but Yuno is okay with it, right? He apologized for that, removing her hands from his face. He sat her on his lap and said, as she said, they could play later when he finished his discussion with Luna. After an awkward pause, the protagonist thought, why are they silent? Luna asked, so what? He wants to tell her something else? He raised his index finger and asked, but first, would her father be against participating? From what he knows, the reason why many refused to participate was because the parents were against their children exposing themselves to such danger. She replied that there should be no problem with that. Her father would surely agree. She had already informed her mother of her intention to participate. He thought, seriously, who is the real head of the family? Then Alice asked, where are they going to go? MC replied that they will probably go to a camp from school. Alice said that means fun, she wants to go too. Her sister replied that she definitely couldn't let her do that. So Alice, she would stay home and behave well. At that moment, Alice looked into the protagonist's eyes and asked, but he wanted to be with her, right? He thought, why was she being so nice? After that, Luna said Alice, she should leave him alone, she wasn't going anywhere. She turned around and screamed indignantly, no. She was so unfair. She was the only one who always got to spend time with Yuno. Luna added, and also, this was a camp for academy students only. There was nothing special about it. She asked, is she sure? Something was fishy here. The protagonist said it was completely his fault. If he apologized to Soleil, maybe he would agree to cross them off the list. She objected. He didn't seem particularly happy about her willingness to participate. He replied that he wasn't. That wasn't what he meant at all. She then suggested, or was it that he wouldn't be able to enjoy his time there if she was around? He thought that maybe he was the reason for her obsessive thoughts. He replied that it wasn't that, He strongly supported her desire to participate. However, the forest of magical creatures was known for its abundance of low-level magical beasts, not just goblins, but also creatures like wolves that moved in packs and hid in the trees. They, being students at the Magic Knight Academy, would be able to handle it. So he didn't like the idea of taking Luna to such a potentially dangerous place. She was surprised. Was that what bothered him? He replied that he didn't mean that, and she said that she didn't see any problem with it. Moreover, he would protect her, right? That's what Luna said to him, looking him up and down with an unwavering gaze. In the end, he couldn't resist her words, and so the day came when they were to leave for the camp. MC, having speared several fish, happily shouted that he caught them. The girl sitting on the shore shouted, "Bravo." She held a fish in her hands and said, "It's a big fish. It looks fat and very tasty. She'll try it." He laughed and said, "It's dinner for 3. She shouldn't eat it all." Then he jumped back into the water and said, he'll try to catch some more. After that, he emerged from the water and looked at the girl and thought, who? Then he came out of the water onto the shore and awkwardly said, "It's his fish." She, continuing to eat, looked up and said, "Aha, he must forgive her for disturbing him." He scratched his cheek thoughtfully and thought, maybe she was from the nearby village? Then he knelt down in front of her and asked, what was she doing here? These lands could be very dangerous. She should be more careful. She looked at him silently, and he looked back at her in surprise. After that, she smiled, extended her hand to him, and asked if he had any more fish. He stood up and looked at the empty bucket with an awkward smile and replied that he had some. She could finish it. She happily said, "Wow, really?" Then he turned around and thought, it can't be helped. He'll just catch some more. He'd never seen anyone eat raw fish before. Then she said that she thought that was enough for today. After that, she disappeared in a sudden gust of wind. The protagonist covered himself with his spear and closed one eye. Then he looked at the overturned bucket and asked, "What?" After a while, he returned to the camp and Athena, smiling happily, ran towards him. He announced that he was back, and she said, "Welcome back." She continued to smile and he thought, it's so nice to be greeted. At that moment, Luna peeked out of the tent holding the cloth. She said, "Welcome back, Yuno." He's back earlier than she expected. He replied that he was back. Nothing happened while he was gone? Luna said thoughtfully, "Nothing like that, although it was hard to say nothing." Athena agreed with her, and he shouted in surprise, "Did a demonic creature attack them?" She said that he did not harm them. The beast was much taller than the trees, watching them from afar. Athena said that she was not sure, but instead, Luna and the protagonist asked, "A divine beast?" She uncertainly confirmed this. Moreover, she felt divine power. The protagonist thoughtfully put his hand to his chin and thought, it was not for nothing that this forest is a divine beast forest. Nothing unusual, but he put his hand to the barrier and thought, the barrier spell that Alice taught him works stably, but without signs of damage. It seems that the divine beast is not hostile, but then why did it appear here? Because of hunger? Unlikely. After that, Luna turned around, tossing her hair, and said, "Anyway, nothing happened. They need to cook something." Athena agreed with her. And at that moment, MC looked into the basket and said that then he would help them in a minute. Luna and Athena rolled up their sleeves, and she said that there was no need for that. After that, they started cooking the fish, cutting it up, while the protagonist was making a fire. The girls smiled at each other while cooking, and the protagonist thought, no matter how sad everything was, he was glad that he was here. And then Alice, who came out of the forest, called him, and he turned around in surprise, noticing Alice and Ian. Smiling, Ian said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He walked up to them and asked, were they also camping nearby? Alice confirmed it. They were looking for a quiet place by the river and decided to stay here. The protagonist said what a coincidence, they did too. Ian giggled and asked, the two of them have known each other since they were kids, haven't they? Alice said it was a coincidence, nothing more. She then whispered to Yuno and said, so Luna and Athena were already cooking together. Was he sure he wouldn't help them? He whispered back to her not to pay attention. They were determined to do everything themselves. By the way, Alice, had Luna ever cooked by herself? She replied that she wasn't sure, but he shouldn't forget that they were talking about Luna. She was sure she could handle everything, no matter what. He replied that he hoped so. At that moment, Luna said that she could hear them perfectly well. The two of them. They jumped in surprise and apologized to her. After that, Alice bowed and apologized for disturbing them. She needed to go away. She asked, is she leaving already? Alice looked up at her in surprise, and MC asked if they wanted to have lunch with them. Ian asked sheepishly, is that possible? Alice asked, is it okay with them? If it's Luna speaking, then it's okay. Then they looked at each other, and Alice said, so, since they're all here. Ian added, yes, if they definitely don't mind, they're very happy. At that moment, Crime came up to them and greeted everyone, saying, what a coincidence. They were surprised, Crime, and he walked forward and kneeling down in front of Luna said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. A full-fledged son of Crime, of the family. Before he could finish speaking, Luna said, Yes, she was busy right now, formalities could wait. He looked at her with a smile, and the protagonist thought that he was still the same. He came alone, without the girl he serves. After that, Crime turned his attention to him and said, and here he is. The last time they met was on the battlefield. After that, he introduced himself, and the protagonist, introducing himself in return, said that it was nice to meet you. Crime, reciprocating, extended his hand. The protagonist looked at this, and then, shaking his hand, said, you can just call him Yuno. Does he mind if he calls him Crime? He replied that he does not mind. They will get straight to the point. He has a question. MC asked, which one? He put his hand on the barrier and asked, is he in charge of the barrier that is here? He answered, yes, sir. Before setting up camp, he asked Alice to teach him how to make a similar barrier to keep out the beasts. At that moment, Athena shouted, Yuno, dinner is ready. Turning around, he smiled and said, okay, Athena, he'll be here soon. And then he turned to Crime and asked, would he like to have dinner with them? They should team up if something were to happen. He thought about it, and then the protagonist called him again. He smiled awkwardly, put his hand on the back of his head and said that he agreed. He would go with them. After a while, they started eating, and Athena asked how they liked it. She had never cooked before. Luna added, this is the least she can do, right? The others shouted, this is excellent. It looks delicious. That's right, Luna. After that, the protagonist looked at the cooked fish in his hands with admiration and thought that Athena cooked food for the first time. He can eat as much as he wants, so he will begin. Afterwards, he took a small bite and, covering his mouth, thought, what is this? At that moment, Crime stood up from his seat and shouted, very delicious. The exquisite bittersweet and slightly salty flavors complement each other harmoniously. Athena looked at the protagonist and asked, what does he think, Yuno? Luna asked, did he like it? His face distorted with horror, and then he clenched his fist and smiling shouted, very delicious. Exquisite bittersweet and slightly salty flavors complement each other harmoniously. They said, what a relief. After that, Athena suggested that Luna try it too, and she agreed with her. At that moment, Crime seemed to mentally call the protagonist, and he agreed with him. After that, he began to put several fish in his mouth, and Crime did the same. The girls looked at them in bewilderment, and Athena asked, Yuno? He, covering his mouth with his hand, shouted words of apology. It was so delicious that his hands grabbed everything themselves. Crime also apologized. They will cook more fish for them, but later. After that, they abruptly ran in the opposite direction, and shouted that they will be back soon. Alice, smiling, said that she was glad that they liked it so much. Ayn added, if that's the case, then no hard feelings. After some time, they were sitting in the hot spring, and the protagonist, turning to Crime, said that he saved him. In response, he said that he shouldn't thank him. He should thank him for inviting him to dinner. At that moment, Athena's voice was heard from behind the walls of the spring, who said, wow, she didn't know that there were such wonderful hot springs here. Ayn added, it looks like a secret hot spring that the elders spent years building. The protagonist thought, the girls are bathing on the other side of the fence. Calm down, Yuno. He covered his nose with his hand and thought, does he really think he can see through this fence using magic? Then Crime called him and asked, do they get along with Luna? He scratched his cheek uncertainly and replied, well, I guess so. He closed his eyes and replied, I see, he is very jealous of him. The protagonist was surprised, and he explained that, to be honest, he was very disappointed. Very. The MC asked if he liked Luna too. He replied that he was not sure. After that, he looked at the moon in the sky and said that he always had a feeling of longing for her. It was there even when he was little. He really wanted her to see his ability. That's why he worked so hard. That's why he wants to test something. Why should he play the role of a nobody? The protagonist asked why he thought so. He replied that, as far as he knew, the only ability that the goddess Athena gave him was wielding a spear. He also claimed that he made this holy ground himself. How does he explain this? He answered uncertainly that it was not so. He just asked Alice to show him. He was just using it as an example. Crime said, holy ground is a strong magic spell. He was called a nobody, but he couldn't just imitate it. In addition, Alice is the only one in their parallel who can handle such magic. MC thought, I see. That's why Alice was looking at him like that. Then he said that he always wondered why she chose him. He guessed that maybe Luna had learned the real power that he was hiding, right? The protagonist answered with an awkward smile that maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. Crime looked at him and asked what was the point of putting himself down like that, and he answered that maybe he wasn't a mediocrity like everyone said. Anyway, he never tried to play the role of a nobody, and he himself wouldn't want to hide his abilities. The only reason he started hiding his abilities was because he was afraid that if he suddenly went crazy, he would hurt someone. Crime said, so those were all just rumors about him. He answered that he never pursued the goal of becoming a hero before. But it was true that he had never put effort into anything except maintaining his ability. He thought he had enough. He had a purpose for using his real ability. To promote the goddess Athena to become the supreme deity. He had decided so, the path he had chosen. Crime noticed that he had a very serious look, and then he leaned back on the rocks and sighed and said, Well, he was in the same situation as him. They both had reasons to continue on their path. The protagonist said, well, something like that. After that, Crime rose from the water and MC asked, confused, what was he doing all of a sudden? He turned to him and said, Yuno, he should allow me to ask. He was challenging him to a duel. So, does he agree? A duel, he means. He wants to fight the one who was recognized by Luna herself. After a while, the protagonist lay with his hands behind his head and thought, so a duel? Crime Elrode, a noble student who placed second in the entrance exams, losing first place to Alice. To be honest, he didn't see the point of this fight at all, but he still thought that his fighting skills were about the same as Claude, the butler of the Flame Mansion. He remembered Crime saying, finally they met, young man. He always wanted her to see his abilities, that's why he trained so hard. The protagonist looked at his hand and thought that he had a nagging feeling that he had to go all the way and face him. After that, he turned on his side and thought that he needed to take a nap before the fight. He lay between the sleeping girls, clutching the blanket with his hands, thinking that it was useless. Why was he so nervous? It wasn't the first time he had to sleep next to a girl. As a child, he often slept with his older sister. At the time, he thought it was very strange. Although, it probably doesn't count. He looked at Luna and thought, nevertheless, why do girls always smell so nice? His face flushed with embarrassment. And after that, he sat up and thought that it was too early. Vulgar thoughts crept into his head. He did not think that it was time to move out. But he still got up, grabbed his things, took the spear, and headed for the exit. Luna, waking up, asked where he was going. He answered that there was one thing that needed to be done. She turned away and said that then he should return as soon as possible. He looked at her and then became embarrassed and, covering his mouth, thought, was she really not asleep? Should he not have looked at her so intently? After that, he changed his clothes and went to the stream. He saw Krim sitting on a stone and asked why he was here so early too. Had he made him wait? He answered that it was not so. He just wanted to admire the moon for a while. He thinks they can start? MC asked how they would decide the winner. He suggested that what about him declaring when he admitted defeat? How does that sound? The protagonist replied that it was fine with him, and then said that he shouldn't forget that he was very strong, okay? He looked at him and replied that he had no doubts, but he still couldn't understand why he wanted this fight so much. He grabbed his sword, holding the weapon out in front of him. The protagonist also grabbed his spear and kicked off the ground, running forward, pointing the tip at the opponent's neck. Crime managed to stop and think, in the blink of an eye. MC said, 1. And his opponent angrily gritted his teeth and dodged to the side, kicked off the ground, then swung his sword, but the protagonist turned after him and pointed his weapon at the back of the opponent's head, then said 2. He won't use magic. Crime swung his weapon again, and the protagonist managed to dodge it, and he said that he was surprised. He was the one who shouldn't have held back from the start. He still didn't admit his defeat. The protagonist said that he believed that he was right, but then they would begin. A multiple attack aimed at his opponent's neck, and Crime looked down desperately. He said that this was the third. He dropped to his knees and, closing his eyes, declared that he admitted his defeat. From now on, he will no longer hide his skills. Is that what he told him earlier? MC confirmed it, and he added that he now understands that it was not a good idea. With his speed, attacks and strength, and the magic he felt throughout the battle, it goes beyond his blessing of wielding a spear given to him by Athena. Simply put, he has a power of a higher level, so he is not surprised that Luna was able to detect his true abilities so quickly. The protagonist closed his eyes and said that he understood. Regarding his own abilities, he was the only one who would truly know. That was why he was going to become more serious from now on. After that, he extended his hand to his opponent, who agreed with him. Crime smiled and said that he was confident that he would succeed. They shook hands. And at that moment, Asteroth hung in the sky and, looking at the assembled demons, asked, "Is everyone here yet?" Smiling, she put her finger to her mouth and said, since everyone was already here, she would like to ask them for a favor. Will they help her? The monsters began to look at each other silently, and she was surprised. Huh? Will they continue to remain silent? After that, she sent a powerful burst of energy into the center of the field and said that not answering her when she asks is very impolite. This upsets her very much. They know? Well, they leave her no choice, so she will ask again. She has one very small task for them. They will handle it for her, right? Her sweet children? Meanwhile, Soleil sat by the fire and looked at the forest ahead. After that, Crime asked Yuno if he had ever thought about joining the student council. He was surprised. The student council? He explained. 3 students are elected for the role of the class monitor every 3 years. Each of the first years had already voted for him and Alice. The protagonist thought, the 2 best students of the year. He asked, and how will they choose the last one? He answered, the winner of the royal tournament next month will determine the 3rd class monitor. With such power at his disposal in his arsenal, he will definitely win. He thinks that it will not be a big deal if he tries to become a member of the council. MC thought about it. I see. This is a great opportunity to double the glory of Athena and him too. After that, he looked at the interlocutor and, smiling, said that he will think about his offer. After that, he thanked Crime. In any case, the student council. But before he could finish speaking, strange sounds were heard from the forest. Crime asked, "What was that?" The protagonist stood up and thought that same feeling. He remembered how Asteroth said with a grin, "Until we meet again, Yuno." He thought that this couldn't be. Meanwhile, Asteroth, watching the horde of monsters heading towards the camp, joyfully shouted, "Wonderful. It's like they merged into one demonic monster." Fenrir at that moment waved his huge tail and thought, "This fool." At that moment, Soleil used magic to transmit, "All students, attention. There was an unexpected invasion of divine monsters in the forest. For their own good, they must gather at the central base as soon as possible," he repeats. At that moment, Alice ran up to the protagonist and called the guys. She asked what they were doing here. They were all being called to gather together. Crime asked Alice what was going on there. She replied that the march of the demonic troops had just begun. A horde of demons was heading straight here. MC said in surprise, "Demons." After that, they quickly ran towards the camp, and the protagonist thought there was no doubt this overwhelming aura that he felt in the forest belonged to the goddess Asteroth. And she was above the forest at that moment and said that she was watching him. "Yuno." She spread her arms out to the sides and asked how he would surprise her this time. She laughed loudly and shouted, "Oh, her Yuno." This was only the beginning of their fun. He should enjoy this night to the fullest. The students were moving through the crowds of monsters at that moment. Crime, attacking another demon, shouted that all the monsters had gone crazy. Alice, continuing to run forward, said that they were lucky that they were only inhabitants of the surface. The commander of these legions could appear very soon. Then she stopped and told the others to look. It was in the center of the camp. Crime said anxiously, "Is his Athena and their Luna there now?" The protagonist confirmed it, and Alice assured that everything will be fine as long as Soleil holds the barrier. A powerful flash of energy flew right above the barrier, and the students wondered what was going on. Asteroth flew to the side, meeting Fenrir, and said, "Oh, what a rude greeting. Lord of the Forest, Fenrir. How many years, how many winters, how is he doing?" He opened his mouth and headed straight for her, and then slammed it shut. The goddess flew back and was surprised. Wow, what power. Their powerful aura met each other, and Fenrir said that everything was so good until she showed up. She smirked. Oh no, what to do? He shouldn't pierce her with such an angry look. It excites her so much. Meanwhile, in the central camp, Maru, looking up at the sky, was surprised. A student standing next to him asked, "What the hell?" At that moment, MC and the others ran to the right place. He shouted, "Luna, Athena!" Stopping, he sighed and said how glad he was that they were all okay. Athena, putting her hands to her chest, said, "Yuno," and he looked at the sky and thought, gold and damn familiar red flashes. Then Alice turned to Soleil and asked, "What are those rays of light?" He looked at the sky and replied that, according to the information received from the reconnaissance team from the capital, this is the goddess Asteroth, and the one fighting her is the divine beast Fenrir. The protagonist thought, most likely, it was because of her that all the monsters were so furious. Soleil put his hand to his side, concentrating all his energy on protecting the barrier. Then the protagonist called him, and he told them not to worry about him. He had just received a message that the Order of the Royal Knights was already on their way, and they were accompanied by the Holy Sword, Rey Astario. He was surprised while the other students were happily shouting that they were saved. The protagonist asked, "Big sister?" Then he looked up at the sky again and thought, how dire was their situation that they even called the Holy Sword here. At that moment, the goddess flew away and said, "God, he still hasn't learned any manners. Huh? To think that he bared his fangs at an innocent girl, and even wild mongrels have more etiquette than him." Fenrir retorted, "She shouldn't bark at him. She's a pathetic fake." She smirked, "But isn't that his job?" She pointed her hands at him and sent a powerful pulse of energy, shouting that he showed everyone his menacing bark. He should say, "Woof woof." He dodged the burst of energy and landed on the ground. After that, he kicked off the ground a few times and rose into the air again. Asteroth asked, "Wow, is he still standing?" Although it's not for nothing that he is called the Eater of Gods. No, but it is still not enough to stop her. At that moment, the students joyfully shouted, "Go, Asteroth! She must destroy this brat." They are betting that the goddess will crush him in one blow. "She can do it, Asteroth." The protagonist, perplexed, turned around and asked, "What?" At that moment, Asteroth put her hands in front of her and said, "Their entire world is based on human faith. The more faith the gods receive, the stronger and more desirable they become. Even a primitive creature like him should understand this, right? He hears it too? Human voices calling out to her, and none of them are addressed to him because she is after all." MC was surprised. What is she talking about? Soleil asked. Isn't it obvious? She is one of the heroic gods. The protagonist objected, but, Sensei, isn't Fenrir the Lord of the Forest? Before he could finish speaking, he thought about it, and he seemed to understand what was going on. Asteroth, in the eyes of the people, is the heroine who saved the world from the power of demons and Satan. The goddess Asteroth showed her face to everyone when people were threatened with death by the demonic legions, and they all don't find this strange? Not one of the details at all? His body trembled and he laughed. It was so amazing. He put his hand to his head and thought how he couldn't see such a perfect plan. A god without a name is doomed to wander forever. He recalled that feeling right now. He remembered the student saying, "Is this a god?" His comrade told him not to laugh so hard or he would hear. He answered, "Exactly. A worthless god who doesn't even have a name." Maru said, "Talentless god, isn't that her name?" The protagonist thought, but the choice he made then. He remembered Alice saying that since he was able to enter the academy, he would be able to make a contract with a strong god and be reborn, but now was not the time. He also remembered how he offered his hand to Athena and asked if she wanted to try. He knew that that choice probably couldn't have been a mistake. He remembered how Athena, with tears in her eyes, asked him to tell her his name. He thought, no way, never, never, because that feeling has been haunting him ever since. There is absolutely no way it could be a mistake. After that, he shouted, "Athena." She turned to him, and he looked at her in surprise. After that, she came closer and hugged him. He was embarrassed and asked what was wrong with her. The others looked at him and he asked embarrassedly, "Athena, him." At that moment, she pulled back slightly and coming closer to his ear said that she asked him to help this child. He was surprised, "Child?" And she answered that these lands are closely connected with the Old Testament and have always been protected by this terrifying beast. Meanwhile, the goddess dealt another blow to Fenrir, and Athena, looking at the sky with tears in her eyes, noticed that he was crying. MC decided that he needed to go. He grabbed his spear more confidently, while Soleil continued to hold the barrier. The students were talking anxiously. If this continued, then Sensei's strength would run out. The knights should hurry. Hordes of demons are advancing here, right? Crime, turning to Alice, said that they should help Sensei. She agreed with him, and then Luna, looking at the protagonist, said that he should find. Otherwise this place anyway, he can help them all, right? Their gazes met, and then he closed his eyes and said that he promises, Luna. After that, Athena nervously waved her hands and shouted that they should wait a minute. They should forgive her. She did such an inappropriate thing, Yuno. The protagonist said that she should not worry. He will stop Asteroth. She shouted, "No need, a human cannot handle it." Before she could finish, he turned around and said that it was not so. Smiling, he put the weapon in front of him and told her to believe in him. Anyway, he has the power bestowed upon her. She looked at him embarrassedly, and he thought that it was so. He will do for her whatever she wishes, even if it means killing another god. Maru looked up at the sky and said in confusion, "This is some kind of madness, a life and death battle between the gods, like a story straight out of a fairy tale." Meanwhile, in the royal watchtower, a student looked into a special device and said in bewilderment, "How come the divine beast Fenrir, the lord of the forest, went crazy?" His comrade said that the gods can no longer interfere with the affairs of children who have a great future. He was surprised, so what does he want? He replied that he does not know. In the old scriptures, Fenrir is depicted as an evil god who devours other gods for the sake of great power. And one day, he tried to devour the entire world. This is truly an evil god. Perhaps there is no point in doubting the reasons for these terrible acts. The strongest gods, including those worshipped by the royal family, decided that in the future, the Lord of the Forest could become the death of all the deities. Now one thing is clear, he should not be forgiven. And all because, by standing in the way of the great goddess Asteroth, who brought them salvation, Fenrir became the enemy of the whole world. Meanwhile, Alice approached Luna and asked why she let Yuno go. She replied that there was no point in trying to stop him. She understood that too, right? She put her hand to her chest and, looking down, said, "That." She thought that it was really so she could probably stop him, but she didn't even do that. She remembered when she asked where he was going. He apologized to her and said that it was necessary. This was the second time she saw such an expression on Yuno's face. In a normal situation, he would laugh and turn on his absent-mindedness, but in difficult and dangerous moments, his look completely changes. The first time it happened was when he made a pact with the goddess Athena. And now, again. Then Luna looked up at the sky and said that he would come back. Moreover, she did not order him to die. Alice looked at her in surprise and thought how much she wanted to believe that. Then she said, "But even then..." Maru interrupted her and said, "What was done cannot be undone, Alice." Even if his calmness was due to stupidity, he did not think that he would so easily go to his death. Maybe now he will turn around and run back. Who knows? It was certainly not for him to say this. At that moment, crime approached them, and spreading his arms out to the sides, said that she should not tense up so much. Alice, they could only watch and wait for the outcome of the battle. He was sure that everything would be fine with him. She told him not to say this so easily. After that, she pointed to 2 bright flashes in the sky and shouted, "Can't they understand?" Yuno went straight there. Everyone looked at her in surprise, and she, covering her face with her hand, turned away and thought, terrible. She lost her composure, of course. Everyone is worried, but... The next second, Crime said that she was right, of course. If they hadn't known each other, such recklessness would have stunned him, but now it was different. Even though he had nothing to prove, he would definitely return alive, no matter what. That was how he felt. Meanwhile, the protagonist stopped and knelt down on one knee. Looking ahead, he realized that he was at a crossroads. From this moment on, even the slightest mistake could be fatal. Now? No. He had to wait for now. A vague premonition haunted him. He wondered if they called this fear? Perhaps legions of demonic troops would soon attack the camp. Perhaps he shouldn't have left Athena, OG, and the others behind? He remembered Crime telling him that he could go, that he would stay and protect OG and Athena. He swears on his life. He thought that everything would be fine. Crime had promised him. He was serious. The other students, although young, were an elite with great potential. The Order of the Royal Knights and his sister were already rushing to help. There was no reason to worry, but the anxiety still did not go away. He remembered the words of the goddess, who asked him to help this child. The next second, he slapped himself on the cheeks, and sighing, thought he needed to calm down and pull himself together. He needed to help Fenrir. This was unchangeable. And what should he do? Goddess Asteroth should be killed, but what would happen to him in the end? His reputation was already terrible, and after this, it would fall to the very bottom. What was more terrible is that this could be the end for the Asteroth family. He was already imagining his sister's reaction. Goosebumps ran down his skin. Maybe his fear was precisely from this? Then he shook his head and thought, wait, when did he become so self-confident? After that, he laughed and decided that he could kill Goddess Asteroth at any moment. This could be a good opportunity. He had long wanted to understand how far he could go. At that moment, Asteroth flew away from Fenrir and asked, "It seems like he has become slower?" "That's right. She's also starting to get bored, so why not end it here?" Then she concentrated energy in her hands, and the protagonist thought, "Now." He abruptly pushed off the ground and flew forward. He thought that he would reach them. The students remaining on the ground pointed to the sky in surprise and shouted that a third flash had appeared there. The student on the tower, continuing to look at the device, shouted, "An unknown glowing object appeared at the observation point." His comrade was surprised. What is he talking about? He replied that he assumes that there was interference from a third party. Now he will begin to measure the magic level. Then he wondered, what is even happening in this forest? Where did such power come from? At that moment, Crime, continuing to look at the sky, said, "This is simply ridiculous. Who is it?" Everyone continued to watch what was happening in amazement, and Luna, adjusting a strand of hair, said with a smile, "What a beautiful blue color. The boy has good taste." The next second, Asteroth turned around in surprise and asked, "Yuno." He grabbed her face, and she asked, "Where is he from?" Fenrir asked, "What the hell is he doing?" But the protagonist said, "Goddess Asteroth, she will go with him." After that, he headed down, and a powerful flash of energy flew through the forest. The student screamed. The blue light dropped the red one to the ground. Alice, turning to Soleil, asked, "What's going on?" He created energy in his hand and answered that he just received a message from the surveillance team. Apparently, he is very unusual, since they identified him so quickly. The magical power of the blue fire surpasses the power of the divine beast Fenrir, and is able to resist the goddess Asteroth. She asked if this means, but before she could say anything, he confirmed it. Although it is not yet determined exactly, it is assumed that an unidentified god came into contact with the goddess Asteroth. At that moment, the goddess took the protagonist by the hand and said that it was amazing. Did he really come all this way just to meet her? Meanwhile, the students were shouting in bewilderment, "Fighting the goddess Asteroth? My god, is this really happening? Is this the beginning of a new legend?" The girls looked up at the sky in alarm. Alice silently prayed for him to be careful. Then she shouted, "Soleil-sensei!" He shouted that he saw, it seemed, the main forces of the demonic army had arrived. Several huge groups of demons were approaching their barrier, and meanwhile Asteroth asked, he was probably waiting for their meeting, right, Yuno? She too, ever since their meeting, had been thinking only about him. However, they had nowhere to rush, right? She grabbed his hand closer to the wrist and said, after all, he had more important things to do now. He asked what was more important. She answered, precisely because he was the only one capable of stopping the panic that was filling this forest. At that moment, Alice sent a powerful energy forward and shouted, "Light!" It should appear. Sacred shield, a barrier appeared above them, and she thought it worked. Merging with Soleil's magic would help strengthen the barrier. The demons grabbed the barrier with their teeth and tried to tear it, and she screamed from this. At that moment, Asteroth said, most likely, right now a horde of demons are killing his friends. He replied, it was she who set them on them, and he came to stop her. She replied, it seems that someone made a mistake. This is how it will be. The divine beast Fenrir, who made the demons attack the poor children, will be stopped by a young man named Yuno. He will become a hero for everyone and will become a god in the evening. With these words, she grabbed his face and he was surprised. What? A god? Then she added, but he was afraid of such a future and came to her for help, right? He thought that it was not so. He needed to stop the goddess Asteroth and fulfill Athena's wish. The goddess asked, is he afraid? He probably really was scared, but he could not worry. She was with him. He thought, anxiety and horror, that's what it was. That anxiety, of course. Then he said, as she would say, Asteroth. She said with a smile, good boy. And the next second, her clothes disappeared from her body, and she, stretching out her arms to him, told him to come to her. She would help him become bolder. She hugged him around the neck, and he, perplexed, pronounced her name. She said that everything was fine, he could do whatever he wanted. Right now she was only his. With these words, she put his hand to her chest, and he embarrassedly said her name. She told him not to hold back. There are only them. She reached for his face and he shouted, Asteroth, he prefers big breasts. With that, he removed his hand from her body and she asked in confusion, what? Then he swung his weapon and attacked forward, but the goddess flew to the side, and he thought that she wanted to hypnotize him, lucky that she is not his type. Then she laughed loudly and, clutching her head, shouted, he is amazing. It is impossible to get bored with him. Initially, she did not even think about anything like that, but maybe it would be nice to do this with him. Perhaps this is also part of their destiny. He must dance with her. Yuno. He noticed that an overwhelming power emanated from her. His suspicions were confirmed. The goddess Asteroth is a fake. Then he grabbed his spear again and asked, so what is she? Or rather, who? Meanwhile, the demons continued to attack the barrier. The students tried to clear the monsters that broke through. Alice once again used the sacred shield. Soleil told her not to overexert herself. She thought that she was the only one who could use this shield. Yuno could return at any moment. She needed to protect everyone. At this moment, the monsters continued to try to break the barrier. She was breathing heavily. The student, attacking the monster, shouted, damn! They keep climbing and climbing. The student fell to her knees, apologizing, saying that she was empty. Alice turned around and saw Crime attacking several monsters with his sword. Then she shouted, the light must appear, the sacred shield. But before she could finish speaking, she fell to her knees and asked in confusion, what? She looked at her trembling hands and asked, is the magic over? The others started calling her anxiously, and she, breathing heavily, thought that she was useless again. First, she couldn't stop the man she loved. And now she didn't even have the strength to fight. She said, a complete failure. And she was still considered the best in the class? She thought everything she wanted, everything she tried so hard for, was for the sake of someone she couldn't achieve. Strong and beautiful, she wanted to be like that, no matter what. And then she lowered her gaze and said, Yuno, where is he? Then she heard a voice that answered that he was here. She covered her face with her hands and asked him for help. She felt his presence behind her back and turning around asked, Yuno? At that moment, Ray, having attacked a group of monsters, told her not to cry, and Alice, turning around, sighed heavily. She said that thanks to her, the barrier held, the consequences were not so terrible. Truly, her magic is amazing. With that, she placed her hand on her head, and Alice said with tears in her eyes, Ray, big sister. She put the sword back in its sheath and replied, it's been a while since they've seen each other, Alice, and she said, it seems like they're doing well. Soleil said that they were glad she had arrived, the holy sword of Rey Astario. Then Garnos put his hand forward and shouted, everyone to their places. Barrier squad, they must guard the camp and protect the children. Cleansing squad, under Rey's leadership, they must destroy all the demons. At that moment, Rey said, the most important thing is to have the medics examine the students who used up their magic. They replied, accepted. Some of the students were surprised. Wow, they're so cool. The most powerful knights of their kingdom, the holy sword of Rey Astario. Thank the gods, they're saved. Then Alice walked up to Rey and said, big sister Yuno. Aine threw her jacket over her shoulders and she replied that she knew. She looked up at the sky, then turned to her, put her hands on her shoulders, and told her with a smile not to worry so much. She didn't see anything wrong with it. She was surprised, and then she apologized for making her worry. Alice wondered, what was she talking about? Then Rey turned around and said, by the way, isn't this Athena? After that, she knelt down in front of her and said that it was a great honor to meet her. She was Rey Astario, the eldest daughter of the Astario family. Her brother takes care of her. Athena exclaimed in surprise, Yuno's older sister? Then she quickly bowed and shouted that her name was Athena. Her brother was a wonderful person. Oh, what else can I say? Please, she must take care of her. She replied that she was incredibly cute. Yuno was really lucky to be able to make a contract with her. She smiled shyly and thanked her. Then Ray and Luna made eye contact and she said she could only be with him until graduation. She closed her eyes and replied, "Okay, but no one knows what will happen." She added thoughtfully, "Maybe their communication will go beyond the bounds, right?" The people present looked at them in surprise. Alice thought, what kind of oppressive atmosphere was this? Then Ray nodded and said that she had good taste, but she should not forget the main thing. Yuno loves his sister very much. She answered, "Maybe, even though they are not the same age, they live in the same house, and he likes it. He constantly says how different she is from the Asteroth family." Ray flinched at these words, and then stepped aside. Alice thought that she had known Yuno since childhood, always sat next to each other. No, that's not enough. Then she began to shake her head and thought, wait, what the hell was she thinking? Ian, confused, looked at her and asked, "Alice?" And she thought, and yet they really are similar, but clearly not in this. At that moment, Garnos approached Ray and said that they were waiting only for her. She replied that she was coming. She took hold of her sword with both hands and, pointing it forward, said, "The older sister will show Yuno her coolness." Energy concentrated around her sword. She pointed her sword upward. A powerful flash of energy flew out from there, and she shouted, "Strike Yuno." After that, she sent a powerful beam of energy forward, which flew far through the forest. The students looked at her in surprise, and she smiled and said, "Great, now they will have fun." The others shouted, "Forward." For Ray, strengthen the position. Crime, looking at her, thought, so this is the strongest sword. Alice thought that she was sure that her sister would soon help him, Maru thought, what a stupid ability. Meanwhile, the protagonist kept asking, what is she or who is she? Asteroth swung her hand and hit the ground in front of her. The protagonist managed to jump back and thought, what was she talking about then? He remembered how she said that he would become a god in the evening. Then he looked at how she swung her hand and approached him. He dodged her hand and thought, damn, this is not the time to think about this. Now is more important. After that, he swung his weapon. The goddess dodged, and then he threw it behind himself, swinging again and hit the ground in front of him. But she managed to fly away, and he thought that it was the goddess who was endangering the students. She used her power to accuse Fenrir of attacking the camp. Someone who enjoys doing evil is not worthy of being a god worshipped by people. How can they even be considered gods? He swung in front of himself again, and Asteroth was behind him. He looked back and pointed his weapon at her, but she dodged to the side again. He thought that he needed to go even faster. After that, he made a few quick strikes, which she dodged again, and he thought, no matter how many legends praised her name, no matter in whose hearts she was a hero, he couldn't keep this a secret, and the next second his spear grazed her shoulder. He looked at her in surprise, and she smiled and said that it was not bad. Fenrir flew in the sky, and then landing on a tree, he thoughtfully looked ahead and thought that he shouldn't rush. He's not ready yet. At that moment, the protagonist looked at Asteroth in surprise, and she smiled and said that it was not bad, but still not strong enough. With these words, she grabbed the spear and, removing it from her shoulder, threw it far forward, thereby throwing the protagonist. He flew back, crashing into the wall, and then saw a powerful energy approaching him. He jumped to the side and then turned over in the air. The goddess, looking at him, was surprised. What? How funny. She did not expect this from him. It was time to seize the initiative. MC, breaking with a spear on the ground, thought that it was too slow. He said that he knew. He thought that he represented the level of her power, so all that remained was to wait until he won. She, putting her hand to her chin, smiled and said, what a cute guy. And now it was time to have fun. They pushed off the ground and met in the sky. There was a bright flash, and the next second, the protagonist was behind her and swung his weapon, pointing the spear forward. He landed on the ground, stabbing his weapon. The goddess at that moment behind him flipped in the air, and then he looked at her and swung his weapon again. His spear caught a huge part of the ground, and he directed it forward, but she sent a powerful flash of energy. While MC managed to crouch, dodging it, he thought that he would kill her right now. He again presented his weapon to her chest and said that it almost happened. He was surprised. What? He thought that he could do it, but his hands stopped. The weapon in his hands trembled. Asteroth smirked. He noticed, didn't he? Realize the importance of his desire to equal her in strength? Although there was a pause, she realized that all this was part of their plan. He thought, this is the best time to attack, but if it was a mistake, everything would end. Then she told him to accept her congratulations. He was able to achieve them. He took a more confident grip on his spear and decided that there was no way to make a mistake. He wanted to promote the goddess Athena so that she would become the supreme deity. So he decided, this is the path he took. He never pursued the goal of becoming a hero. He did not put effort into anything except for restraining his abilities. They are similar. They both have a reason to continue moving forward. Well, something like that. At that moment, Asteroth smiled and said, He is the only one who was chosen, the one who will save them from boredom. God congratulated him on his birth. He wants to make a contract. The protagonist thought that she should shut up, and she threw her hands up and screamed. Now she is truly grateful to the gods. He thought, enough. She screamed. They gave her such a beautiful toy. He grabbed his face and thought that she should stop confirming his choice. They are completely different. He looked at her through his fingers, and she enthusiastically screamed. They should dance. He should show his strength. He should declare himself. He thought, if she does not shut up. Then he threw his weapon and, swinging his fist, screamed loudly, attacking her. But the next second he broke away from the ground, and Fenrir mentally screamed, idiot, he should not jump above his head. A powerful column of light headed towards them, crashing into the ground, forming a huge hole. At that moment, Lucifer appeared in this place and stopped in the air. He looked at the goddess and said that she was breaking the contract, Asteroth. Then Fenrir flew further from the flash of light, the protagonist slightly opening his mouth and slightly climbing out of there, wondering what the hell was this. He replied that he should not climb to him. Now he has more serious problems. MC realized that he did not have a chance. He looked at Lucifer and thought that the gap between them was too big, and yet it reminded him of himself. After that, he jumped out of Fenrir's mouth and flew down. He turned around indignantly and mentally shouted, "Fool, where did he rush to?" The protagonist turned around and apologized to him, but he needed to talk to him. Fenrir, confused, stopped and mentally shouted, "Hey!" Meanwhile, Asteroth said, "Is she breaking the contract?" Funny, although he himself is not very observant of the rules. So what did he want to say? She wasn't wrong when she came here to find answers about the appearance of a nameless goddess and a man named Yuno, but he immediately came to stop her. She never thought that things would turn out like this. But this isn't the end. Is that what he wanted to say? Right, Almighty? Her body began to spark with hatred, and he said, enough. Her magic doesn't work on him. She smiled and asked, so he's going to run away again? He told her not to get cocky. He won't interfere. As long as she controls herself, it's not time yet. Then she looked at him in surprise and then nodded, giggled and said, I think she understood. But at that moment, Lucifer looked away and said that he was a laughingstock. The protagonist looked up at him and was surprised, and he added, his attention is not worth someone who can't control his abilities. He said in surprise, he's a laughingstock? Lucifer added, the one who plays with fate is either a jester or a fool. He is just a piece on the chessboard, following predetermined moves. He is not able to influence anything. He thought about it, and then, putting his finger to his chin, said, okay, but so what? At that moment, Asteroth flew up to Lucifer, and putting her hand to his cape, laughed loudly and said that this was brilliant. He was so funny. Did he notice Lucifer? He does not perceive anything in such a tone at all. The protagonist thought, she said Lucifer? The supreme deity? He said it's boring. What is he doing here? He has no goals or ideals. They are just fruits of fate, so they cannot decide anything themselves. The protagonist thought, what is he talking about? What does he want to say? Lucifer added, until he understands his words, his life will have no meaning. He must not disappoint him. Then he put his hand to his side and created a portal and told Asteroth to go. She replied that she understood. After that, she winked at the protagonist and said that they would see each other again. If he missed her, he should call. The next second, the portal closed behind them, and the demons who attacked the camp began to look around in confusion. MC sighed with relief and thought that for now, the threat was over. Right? At that moment, he felt a presence behind him and said, oh. He turned around and bowed to Fenrir, thanking him. He thought that he didn't know why his mind was clouded at that moment, but he almost missed the mortal danger. He wanted to save everyone, but in the end, he was saved. After that, Fenrir mentally asked, is he leaving already? He reached for his spear and replied that it was. Athena and his friends were probably already waiting. He walked forward and thought that perhaps Asteroth's departure had stopped the march of the demonic troops, but his goal had not yet been achieved. He remembered the words of the students who blamed Fenrir for everything, and thought that he needed to protect him. The next second, Fenrir stopped in front of him, and he looked at it in surprise. He told him to climb in and let him take him to his friends. The protagonist smiled and replied, no, it's not worth it. At that moment, the student noticed that the demons were running away. Crime said with a smile, Asteroth won. Although they are low-ranking, they look very scared. Apparently, they were greatly intimidated before the attack. At that moment, Ray waved her hand, turning to the warriors, and ordered everyone to return to the base. It's time to regroup and begin the next task. They answered, yes. At that moment, Garnos passed by her and said that it was true. They were starting Central Camp. Athena, approaching Solil, apologized and asked him to let her look for Yuno. The divine power had disappeared, and the danger seemed to have passed. He looked at her, and then shook his head negatively and pointed his finger to the side. She objected, but she was the one asking for his help. Then she looked in surprise in the direction he was pointing and saw the protagonist, who was sitting astride Fenrir. The protagonist thought that this was wonderful. Everything was fine in the camp. The people present turned their attention to him, and Athena put her hand to her chest, then ran to him. He got off Fenrir, and she threw herself into his arms and happily said, "He's alive." He hugged her and replied that he was back. Tears appeared in her eyes, and she thanked him. Then she pulled away, their faces reddened with embarrassment. The protagonist looked away and said in fear, "Sister." They hadn't seen each other for a long time. Ray threw herself into his arms and, pressing his head to her chest, said that she was so glad that her brother was alive. They were all humbly waiting for him. Can he imagine? And his sister believed with all her heart that he would return safe and sound. Is he not injured? Maybe he wants to eat? His sister will bring him everything for him, anything. He answered confusedly, "Big sister, this is very embarrassing, he is fine." Then she let him go and said, "Oh well." She turned her gaze towards Fenrir and asked, "Who is this?" He answered that he found him in the forest, he saved his life, and then brought him here. She answered, "I understand." She stroked Fenrir's head and thanked him. After that, she knelt down in front of him and added, "By the way, for a forest animal, he has very well-groomed fur." At that moment, MC said, "Sister," she reminded him of something. "What is the situation in the forest now? Has anything changed?" She replied that there was a terrible panic, but then the demons came to their senses and fled back into the forest in terror. And all this happened because of the Lord of the Forest, a wild beast. Such information came from the capital. He thought, as expected, now he needs to figure out what to do next. After that, she turned around and said, "Okay, it's time to move out to carry out an important task." He asked what kind of task. She turned around and answered, "Subjugation of the divine beast Fenrir. Such is the order of their kingdom, the royal decree." Then the protagonist turned to the Lord of the Forest and said that he would go to the camp alone and he should hide for now. He was surprised. "What?" "He is a divine beast, the protector of the forest." He answered, "That's why he asks him about this." He thought that, because of the battle with Asteroth, the attitude towards him among people must have worsened. He does not want to see how the sacred beast is condemned. Then he told him not to worry. He clenched his fist and added that he would deal with the accusations on his behalf. The Lord of the Forest. Then he moved away and added that he would go. He ran forward and thought that now he was ready. The battle with Asteroth gave him confidence. The next second, he dropped to one knee, and looking at his hand in surprise, noticed that he had no strength. He swung his spear and shouted, "Damn!" At such a time, then Fenrir stopped next to him and told him to get on. This is a normal rebound from overusing his powers. Even he would prefer to stay like this for now. He asked, "Will he regret it?" And he thoughtfully replied, "No need to worry, he should think about himself. It may seem fine at first glance, but he can sense his powers, so they both may need help." He thought he understood everything, and then mentally replied, "Okay." He relies on him. After that, he turned to his sister and asked, did she believe it? That Fenrir organized the march of demonic troops? After that, he clenched his fist and shouted, "But that's not true." They were deceived. Fenrir saved him, the culprit of everything that happened. Before he could finish speaking, she shouted, "Yuno." She approached him and, putting her hand on his shoulder, told him not to do anything stupid. His older sister would not be able to cover for him. He asked if they had any proof that Fenrir was to blame. She replied that this was not the case, but since ancient times everyone had called him the devourer of gods. Therefore, since he had entered into battle with a god, there was nothing to think about. It was necessary to eliminate such a threat as quickly as possible. That was what the top brass thought. He clarified, and only for this reason were they ready to blame the Lord of the Forest? She told him to listen. This was a royal decree. Fenrir's execution was already a foregone conclusion. This was supported by the majority of the gods. In this world, the word of a god is law, and the word of a god who saved the world is not subject to doubt. He asked, perplexed, "What the hell?" He thought, some unknown force masterfully changes the truth to a lie. The majority of the gods, along with Asteroth, support the decision to execute. Can they really be considered gods? So this is the reason for his vague premonition. A story soaked in lies, created by the faith of people and the will of the higher gods. He does not have enough strength to resist it. So what to do? How to protect Fenrir without harming others? He must think. The next second, Garnos called him and asked, did he seem to say that Fenrir was innocent? He answered that it was so. He personally saw it. He asked, who was the organizer then? Can I find out more? He answered that it was the goddess. But before he could finish speaking, Ray said, a blue meteor. He was surprised, sister. And she added, an unknown god appeared in the midst of the battle of two gods, equal in power to the great goddess Asteroth. Now they are trying to find him. The protagonist thought she must be talking about him. But why only now? The next second, Maru folded his arms and said, "Hey, Yuno, he shouldn't be stupid. He left on his own, he came on his own, and now he says that Fenrir saved him? Why would the beast that attacked the goddess Asteroth help him? He should tell them. Maybe he's completely crazy?" Yes, that's probably it. The protagonist thought that his magic was comparable to the magic of the gods, but now he was powerless. He remembered Athena's words and thought that she shouldn't say stupid things. In this rotten world, he can't not make the goddess Athena shine, not fulfill her desire. No, not like that. He doesn't want her to shine in this place. He lowered his gaze and said that this world needs to be fixed. He thought that was right. He was wrong from the beginning. If he doesn't like the world, he just needs to change it for the goddess Athena. The next second, the Lord of the Forest mentally asked, what is he thinking? He answered that he had found it, a way to save him from death. He asked, did he want to make the whole world his enemy? He answered, not him. The world would not rise up against him. He thought that a new power was needed for this. As far as he remembered, Fenrir was capable of this. I wonder if Athena would be very angry with him after all? Then he called her and, putting his hand to his chest, said that he had an important conversation with her. She smiled and said that he would be fine. He thought, a contract with a god. In this world, there is an unspoken rule that such things happen only once in a lifetime. He asked her to wait, and she said that it was her wish. She asked him to save Fenrir. He thought that most gods do not like it when a person receives the support of several at once, because a contract represents trust, but even so. Then Athena put her hand to her chest and added that she never wanted to appropriate him only for herself. He thought, his Athena. She closed her eyes and added that he gave her the light, so she asks him not to worry. His incredible kindness can give happiness to everyone. He looked at her in surprise, and then looked down and thought, yes, how happy he is that he is bound by a contract with her, like a blessing from above. After that, he thanked her, and she shyly added that he should not forget about her. He looked at her in surprise, and she said, after all, she was the first goddess with whom he had a contract. He thought it was cute. The next second, Garnos pointed his hand forward and announced that they were starting an operation to destroy the Fenrir beast. Everyone split up and started searching the forest. MC looked at him and thought that she should not worry, Athena. Even if Zeus was first, she was his priority, and that was undeniable. He passed by his sister, and she said, see you later. He answered, of course, sister. After that, he knelt down next to Fenrir and said that he had a request. He must make a pact with him. Fenrir asked what he wanted. He answered, his power. The Lord of the Forest said that his power was already superior to his. A pact was nothing. Before he could finish speaking, the protagonist said, a skill that allows him to change his appearance. That's what he wants. The ability to change his size will be enough for him. Fenrir clarified, were those words about the world not rising up against him? The protagonist interrupted him and answered that it was so. He would rewrite the reason for the demon's attack. He clenched his fist and added, it will not be Asteroth, not Fenrir, and not even Yuno. A creature with enormous power, a blue meteor, he thinks that it will be able to destroy everything. Fenrir said, what nonsense, it sounds interesting, of course, but the gods will never understand this. He should not think that making gods enemies or friends will be easy. He replied that he understood, but there was something that only he could do. He would open a new path for this world, and he wanted him by his side. He needed his power. Fenrir looked at him, then looked down and replied, okay. He would watch him. The protagonist added that he would give him seats in the front row. What was the thought behind those eyes that looked into the very soul? Then MC approached Soleil and said that he would take Fenrir to the forest then. Soleil turned away from him and waved his hand, then told him to just mind his own business. The protagonist said that if anything happened, it would be on his conscience. Then he looked at Fenrir, and they ran into the forest. MC mentally suggested that they move further into the bushes. They needed to be out of sight when they went deeper into the forest. Luna was standing there. MC didn't understand what she was doing there. She looked at him and said that he could have left Fafnir at her house. She thinks that her father doesn't like animals, although she doesn't care. She walked up to Fenrir, sat down on the ground and started petting his head. Then said how elegant and beautiful he was. He looked very noble. She was sure he would be happy to live with him. The protagonist walked up to her and sat down next to her. Then he petted her too and said if she wanted to be left alone, but before he could say it, Fenrir hit him with her paw. Then MC said that she still wanted to go back to the forest. What a shame. Luna asked why he actually came here then. The protagonist replied that he needed to go to the toilet. Luna told him to go. MC was confused and said that he thought she shouldn't watch this. She fixed her hair and said that in any case, it was over now. He was able to stop the clashes of the gods and returned safe and sound. That was enough. The protagonist stood in front of her, thinking that this was the first time he heard such tenderness from Luna. Was his well-being really that important to her? Then MC brought his hand to his chest and wanted to say something. But Fenrir mentally told him not to say anything. Everyone has their own life. He is only a human. Luna replied that he was her uncouth, impudent knight, that's all. She added that if he needs to go somewhere, he must swear an oath to her. She asked him to swear that he will not change when he returns to her again. The protagonist stood, looked at her confidently, and replied that he swears that he will return as he promised, remaining himself. He will continue to serve her. Luna turned and started to walk away, and told him to try not to forget his words. MC and Fenrir turned and ran further into the forest. Luna whispered what a fool he was. The protagonist turned back and watched her walk away. Fenrir asked him in his mind, was he lucky with his companions, right? MC replied, yes, it could be considered a blessing. They ran further into the forest and sat down behind a bush. Fenrir asked him, was he ready? The protagonist extended his hand forward and thought that he would be lying if he said he wasn't nervous. From now on, he will become the Blue Meteor, the god and master of the mind behind the panicked flight of the demon army, and will speak to his sister and the knights of the kingdom. And then MC said that he relies on him. Fenrir placed his paw on the protagonist's hand. The protagonist thought, I wonder what Fenrir felt when he talked to his sister. He was a divine beast, the guardian of these lands for many centuries, and the gods and their believers erased his name from the face of the earth. He does not know what influence the legend had in this case, but it is certainly hidden from everyone. The goddess Asteroth made the demons flee, and the beast Fenrir tried to stop her. This is complete nonsense, so he wants to do this, change this world. Then he kissed Fenrir's paw. Suddenly, a vortex of energy appeared around him. He looked around and thought, Forest, is he happy? Suddenly, a girl hugged him from behind and thanked him and added that she had found a meaning in life in this world again. MC was very surprised and thought, a girl? A child? That voice is so familiar. Then he looked at his hand, and Fenrir mentally told him that a contract was made. It might have seemed too fast, but he had gifted him with several skills. One of them was reincarnation. Then he asked him, he wanted this ability, right? The protagonist was confused. Fenrir asked him, is something wrong? He replied that everything was fine, he just imagined something. Fenrir asked in surprise, did he imagine it? MC scratched his head and asked him to repeat the name again. He answered, reincarnation. The protagonist was even more confused. Fenrir asked him, what's wrong with his face? MC apologized to him and asked, what does this do? Fenrir mentally told him that it allows you to change your appearance to any image you imagine. It requires a huge amount of mana, but it will not be a problem for him. The protagonist happily shouted that he got it. That's exactly what he wanted. It's an interesting name. Fenrir told him that this skill only changes appearance, so he should remember that a strong mage who can detect magical energy can find out his identity. MC looked at his hands, answered that he understood, and he suggested not to put it off. Then he clenched his fist, closed his eyes, said, reincarnation. He thought that if he can change his appearance at will, then why not change completely? At first, let the hair be white with a silver tint, beautiful moon color, like Athena, blue eyes, the color of a clear sky, like Alice. He will make the face beautiful and precise. It will be as impressive as crime. He will choose black clothes. He will pay tribute to the beautiful skin of Fenrir. For solidarity, he will add age to himself. There is no point in changing the gender, and he also wants wings like Lucifer. Then he thought about what color to make it. Since he would be an evil god, opposing himself to Asteroth, he would also make the color of his wings the opposite. Then he spread his arms out to the side and shouted, done. He asked Fenrir how he liked it. He thought about it and then answered that it was pretty good. The protagonist said that he would go then. He added that Fenrir should wait for the right moment. He flew into the air, and he answered that he would wait for him. He looked at the moon and thought that it was again insanely beautiful. One only has to come closer, as if it beckons and attracts to itself. Reality is beautiful for everyone who sees it. It is the fate and truth of this world. Therefore, the world needs someone who can declare the mistakes made. He remembered that Asteroth told him that he would become a god in the evening, and he was the only one who was chosen, the one who would save them from boredom. Then he remembered how Lucifer told him that he was not able to influence anything. He doesn't care about his chances, he just follows the path he thinks is right. He flew up to the camp and said, here they are. He turned to the moon and said, Athena, Luna's sister. He suggested that they start this game. He pressed his hand to his chest, clenched his fist, said that soon they would meet again. He would create a new history. Ray turned to him and ordered him to state his name. He smiled and asked, is that a question for him? He introduced himself and said that he was the god of evil and that he was the one who had arranged the demon attack. Noah imagined how he would fight his knights and said that for a start, it was not bad at all. Yuno looked at the book and said that this name was from a fairy tale that he had read a long time ago. He thought that this name would be suitable for a god. All he needed was to show his superiority, and as soon as they believed that Noah was the cause of the attack, then the deed would be done. Noah watched the crowd from the sky and said that it was time for him to land. He began to quickly descend, but as it turned out, he did not understand how to stop in time. He asked how he could do this, and where was the break. Noah landed on the ground with all his might, and thick dust enveloped the knights. They began to shout in confusion. What happened here? Something exploded behind them. Was this an ambush? They approached the crater in the ground formed by the fall and noticed Noah's legs sticking out. He stood up and said sarcastically that nature was too harsh today. He thought, what is he even talking about? And the knights rushed to attack him. Yuno said that he wanted to start all over again, but there was no turning back. Noah smiled madly and asked, is this about him? In that case, he will have to continue the show. Ray asked Garnos to retreat his troops. He asked why? Garnos added that creatures like him should be guarded. Ray exclaimed in displeasure so that he did not make her repeat herself. Garnos ordered the troops to retreat, and Noah mentally thanked his sister for looking at him like that. At some point, he was curious how it would go, but now he understands that he must play the role of an evil god without hesitation. Noah said with a smile that it seemed like the only person among them who still had a brain was that woman. Ray called out to Garnos and said that if he didn't want his people to die just like that, he should be careful with his orders. He replied that maybe that creature wasn't human. She meant that this was the true form of the blue meteor. Ray said that wasn't exactly true, but they had to act carefully to check it. Garnos wondered if the blue meteor had the same magical power as Asteroth, and right now, he didn't feel any magic coming from him. Yuno thought about it and said that it was his mistake. Noah looked at his hands and thought that he had gotten so used to hiding his power that he had forgotten to release it. Now was the perfect time to restore his magic after the battle with Asteroth. He would release just a little bit for a warm-up. Magic began to thicken around Noah, and the knights tensed up, expecting a blow from him. After he released the magic, the knights began to hiccup. Garnos asked in confusion, what kind of oppressive energy was this? This man, is he really a blue meteor? Noah began to laugh madly and scream, what was going on? They were like defenseless puppies. Where was their vaunted courage, and how were they going to hunt Fenrir if they were so weak? He ordered these pathetic parodies of knights to immediately answer all his questions. Yuno thought sadly that now he understood why Lucifer called him a laughingstock. They were like pathetic puppets dancing to someone else's orders and unable to understand the simple truth. What kind of people are these, and why do they exist? Watching them, he gets confused. Garnos said that he was a true devil. Noah approached him and asked, the devil? He would have rather said that they were comrades in misfortune, so he thinks they will work together. Garnos got angry and asked what he meant. Noah wondered if they were going to kill Fenrir, who was protecting ordinary people. He wanted to pay them for that. So they would make a deal? Garnos ordered him to shut up and stop talking nonsense, otherwise he would pay. Noah smiled and asked, who else was talking nonsense here? He had a premonition, right? He was the one who had arranged the demon attack. Ray stood patiently aside and watched what was happening. Garnos shouted that it was all a lie, and it was all because of Fenrir, since they had orders to kill him. His Lord Mammon said this without a doubt. Noah put his hand on his forehead and asked madly, is this true? Then he must tell his lord that he and his people will not stop this war. Garnos got angry and madly exclaimed that he will not allow him to insult his lord. Ray grabbed Noah's hand and introduced herself to him, saying that she acknowledged that he was a god, and then asked if she could ask him his name. If so she could. Noah smiled and began to speak, when suddenly he fell silent, and his gaze met Ray's. Suddenly it dawned on Noah. He tried to say a word, but he couldn't. Ray looked at him questioningly. He suddenly grabbed his throat and thought, what's going on? He can't say a word. Noah remembered Athena asking if anyone knew about the existence of wandering gods. Noah exclaimed that he knew that they were weak gods who had no names. She said that when making a contract with a nameless god, he must be careful. She also wanted to tell them about the rules that existed for gods. A god must respond to his name, so when making a contract, they must be sure to know this. Noah was exhausted and thought that this skill could only change the shell. He grabbed his throat and thought that he was an ordinary person and the rules of the gods should not apply to him. So why can't he say his name? Noah cleared his throat and grabbed his head with his hands. It seemed to him that his head was about to explode. He remembered the name Zeus and thought, wasn't that the name of the old man with whom he once made a pact? And now he wants him to say his name? Ray asked in confusion, what's the matter? He was in a lot of pain and he felt like he was out of his mind. He remembered Lucifer, who says that whoever plays with fate is either a jester or a fool. They are just a piece on the chessboard, following a predetermined move, and are not able to influence anything. Noah began to breathe heavily and told him to shut up, no matter where he goes, because difficulties await him everywhere. He caught his breath and said that his name was Noah, when suddenly a strong energy enveloped him and he rushed straight at Ray. Noah said in a frantic voice that he advised her to remember this name. Ray blocked his attack with her sword and asked contentedly, "So his name is Noah? So he really is a blue meteor." She just wanted to talk, but he apparently wanted to fight. Noah attacked her again and again, not giving her a rest. He stopped attacking her and grabbed his headdress and said that it seemed that his head stopped hurting. Yuno asked in confusion, "What was that?" Ray smiled and said that it was some kind of disappointment. She was fighting with only half her strength and that was all he could do. Noah thought about it, and then said that this was far from his entire strength, but only a tenth of it. Ray tensed up and activated magical energy which enveloped her entire body. She headed towards him and said that in this case, she would try not to disappoint him, and activating the skill, magical swords appeared above her head. Noah looked at her with satisfaction and thought, this was the first time he and his sister had fought each other since she became a sword saint. Ray cast the secret technique Crisis Yuno and her clones attacked him. Noah understood and thought that it was a rush attack consisting of an attack by illusionary copies of the original. He swung his leg and delivered one big kick to the clones, which caused a powerful explosion. Ray looked at him in surprise, and Noah criticized the name, calling it terrible. The knight asked in surprise, did he repel Ray's most powerful attack with one blow? Noah laughed and asked, is that all? Yes, he was just stretching his legs. Ray lowered her blade and said that she was impressed, but before she finished, she wanted to ask him, why did he need that attack? Noah grinned and said that there was no need, but it was necessary for them to know about him. The knights looked at him in confusion and asked, risk the lives of children for this? He is a real devil. Noah said that he is an evil god and that they will become his tools to change history. Ray asked, if this were true, the other gods would not stand aside. How can he prove his involvement? Noah asked, do you need proof? He thought that his sister would not believe it so easily and he had nothing, but he would improvise. Noah looked around and, pulling the monster by force to his hand, asked, should he attack again? Ray and the other knights watched in horror. Garnos rushed to attack and swung his sword at him. Noah stopped his blade with one hand and Ray called out to him. Garnos said that he will destroy him since he should not exist, or all of humanity will end. The blade began to crack from Noah's grip on it, and Garnos gritted his teeth in anger. Ray ordered him to stop fighting as he was no match for him. Noah muttered, if she didn't want sacrifices, then she should stand there. He would show this idiot that life is not easy. He was irritated by Garnos's gaze, and if he really cared about people, then this was a very stupid decision. It would be better if he tried to understand what they were talking about, but he missed his chance. Noah broke his blade and thought about how he gave himself entirely to the god and lost his own opinion. The elder sister always found the positive in everything, and he doesn't even try. A cloud of energy appeared in his hand as a warning not to try to desecrate his greatness. He gave him a choice, life or death, and let him decide for himself. The knights lost their minds and exclaimed that this was unbearable. They could not defeat him and did not want to die. Garnos asked with displeasure, where did they run? And then ordered them to return to their positions. Noah directed a cloud of energy at him and asked, will he not follow them? Garnos angrily clenched his teeth and said that as long as he had the blessing of his master, he would not obey him. Noah smiled and ordered him to die. Garnos thought that he did not know who he was now, but it did not matter because he had been preparing for this from the very beginning. Yuno froze and thought about fire. He thought that he was a man, but he had to pretend to be a god, and where was it shown that an evil god was afraid to kill people? Even a weakling would not be called that. The protagonist angrily clenched his teeth and concentrated on the attack. Garnos smiled contentedly and asked, his hands were shaking. Was it not he who had threatened him? Suddenly, Yuno had an idea and released a powerful stream of energy straight at the target. Would he be able to handle it? After all, killing a person was a sin. Ray was about to rush to attack when she suddenly noticed that he had weakened. Suddenly, Yuno appeared in front of Garnos and thought, is this all he wanted to show him? Athena called out to the protagonist and a stream of energy was directed straight at her. Noah was scared and thought, why is Kami here? It is impossible. He will not be able to stop it. After all, no one knew that the only goddess Athena, whom he cherished, would be killed by him. He feels empty, and despite his great power, he has no desire to become a hero, to benefit from it, and be popular with girls. He still does not understand what he wants to become. Even if his wishes came true, it would not bring him happiness. He did not want anything, and that day his heart shone. He remembered Athena and thought that nameless gods are a delusion. Because of the great power given to him at birth, indifference became his constant companion. But one day he found her, his goal. He wanted to make Athena a great goddess, and only this made him live. So, how could he be so stupid? Noah started crying when suddenly Ray said that the evil god underestimated her and deflected his attack with her sword. Crime jumped towards Athena when suddenly Ray threw him aside and he fell to the ground. Noah remembered how Crime said that he would protect Oja and Kami, after which he swore an oath of life. After the dust from the attack flew to the sides, Noah angrily clenched his teeth and mentally said, "What was he doing here? They were asking for it." Yuno answered him in his mind to end his performance. Should he see his pathetic face, or does he think he is so good that he can become an evil god? Noah started crying and then wiped his tears with his hand. Yuno said that they appeared on their own, and that's it. Athena grabbed the protagonist and with tears in her eyes asked why he was doing this. She asked him not to go to certain death alone. Noah looked at them in confusion, and Rai easily exhaled and smiled. Yuno put his hand on her shoulder and told her not to worry and that he would be fine. Athena, Ray, and Crime looked at him in surprise. MC thought that sometimes he wondered if he was worthy of standing next to such a beautiful goddess. He looked at Noah and mentally said, "Please don't tell him that he wants to stop right now. What kind of evil god is he? Who stands aside with scared eyes?" Noah thought that he needed to do something, but what exactly? Ray smiled and asked, "Well, the situation has changed, right? There is another god here now, and it is the goddess of beauty, Athena, with whom he has imprisoned her brilliant, talented, and handsome younger brother. Will he be able to handle him?" Noah grabbed his head and laughed madly. He muttered, "So this is how these pathetic people are used to doing." Noah admitted that he underestimated them because he really didn't expect this, especially that the goddess Athena would be here. They really thought of everything. Aina looked at him questioningly. The knights began to whisper among themselves in surprise about who the goddess Athena was, and it seemed that Ray had a plan, since she was saying so, and Noah was just scared. They exclaimed that they had a chance for Athena to save them. The goddess looked at them embarrassedly. Noah tensed up and said that if the strongest knight of the Holy Sword united with the goddess Athena, then he would not defeat them. Ray smirked and said how smart he was, and if he dared to harm someone else, then the goddess's holy hammer would catch up with him. Athena asked in fear, what was she talking about? And then she released her power outward right at Noah, and he flew to the side onto the ground. Ray and the others watched what was happening with satisfaction. Athena looked in surprise at Noah, who was lying in the rubble of the tree. Suddenly, he raised his head and shouted that the goddess Athena had a good blow. The knights were perplexed and asked what had happened. After all, they had seen how the goddess had dealt with the evil god. Athena turned to them in fear and exclaimed that it was not her. Noah struggled to his feet and muttered that it was useless and that he would have to retreat. This time, they were saved, thanks to this goddess. But they must not forget that he would change this world, and the day would come when they would regret what they had done. And that would come soon. Athena looked at her hands questioningly. Ray asked Noah to prepare for this properly, since this world would not accept his existence, and Noah flew away from there. The knight fell to his knees and said that they were saved. His colleagues looked at Athena with admiration and rushed to thank her. Athena waved her hands excitedly and said that it was not her. Ray ordered everyone to calm down and not to pressure her. She called out to the goddess and grabbed her hands, admiringly said that she did not have enough words to thank her for saving her. She asked her to look after her little brother. Athena, half fainting, thought about what to do. She looked around and called out to the protagonist. Crime said that he went out on business. Before leaving, he only said that he would return soon and headed there. Meanwhile, Yuno was sitting behind a tree trunk and healing his wound. He exhaled heavily and said that he was very tired. And then he thought that everything was going according to plan, and Noah had become the enemy of the whole world. Although, he will have many minions who want to kill and weaken interest. After all, Fenrir said that there will be those who want to expose Noah. The protagonist crawled to the stream and looked at his reflection in it, and thought that he did not know how to hide his powers, but he could not lose his vigilance. After all this is for the sake of loved ones. From now on, he must be even more careful and will hide his true abilities until the last moment. Until Athena and Luna find themselves in mortal danger. He closed his eyes from the bright sun rays and listened to the birds singing until he fell asleep. After a while, Yuno woke up and, turning his head, noticed that Athena was sitting next to him. She wished him good morning and stared ahead. He looked at her in fear and thought, what is she doing here? Athena hesitantly said that she was worried and thought he would return immediately after concluding a contract with Fenrir. And he ran away somewhere again, and in the end they found him here, since Crime helped her with the search. The protagonist thought that Fenrir quickly got his bearings and reincarnated into him. He apologized to her for making her worry and called out to her. Athena sheepishly asked him not to go anywhere again, and MC remembered how she asked him to do so on the battlefield. He watched her silently. Athena said that although she had nothing to return, she was still the Kami that the protagonist decided to be with. Yuno apologized to her and thought back to what happened that she probably didn't like his plan. but he had already decided to make her the most famous goddess since that was his life's goal. Yuno extended his hand to her and suggested that they return to the others. Athena smiled and extended her hand to him, agreeing with him. MC thought again about what seemed impossible now, but he would make it happen. Meanwhile, Soleil sat on a chair and held a book in the air with magic. He thought about the evil god Noah and thought it was a coincidence or fate. He closed the book and grinned and said that he had finally found him. After some time, Alice called out to Yuno and asked who this was. The protagonist was hammering a nail into the boards, and Fenrir was lying next to him. MC pointed at him and said that this was the wolf he had befriended in the training camp, and that he was building him a house. Alice silently looked at Fenrir and asked, "Is this a female?" Yuno was surprised and asked what she meant. She asked again, or a male, or still a female. The protagonist looked at him and thought what he should answer her. Fenrir put his head on his paws and mentally answered as he wanted. Alice said that it was a girl and asked, "Is this his pet?" Yuno agreed and thought, "Does shyness also apply to animals?" They silently looked at each other, after which she looked at Fenrir with admiration. MC calmly exhaled, and days have passed since that incident. After much thought, it was decided that Fenrir would live with him. And Luna wanted this, so everything went as it should. Luna asked if he could touch her. Yuno asked Fenrir for permission and she agreed. She said that she liked dogs, and the protagonist thought, dogs? Although he was able to save Fenrir from danger, she was still under suspicion, and she herself was not in the most advantageous position. Therefore, the best solution now would be to lie low and wait. Luna asked how he was feeling and told Alice not to bother him. Athena smiled and said that she was glad to see the protagonist. They brought something tasty. Yuno thanked them for their concern. Luna apologized to him for the trouble they caused and for the one who does not really like animals. MC told them not to worry about it. A few hours earlier, Argos had said that they couldn't keep Fenrir. Charlotte had objected that she was just a pet and that Luna didn't ask him for things that often. Father had said that was a different matter. Why had they gone to camp? Hadn't they been told how dangerous these animals were? Who would take responsibility if something happened? Luna had asked if Father saw this creature as a creature capable of harming people. Charlotte had happily said that she had even given her a paw, and they hadn't taught her yet. The man had thought about his wife's words and said that she would live in the kennel, because only then would he give his consent. Yuno had thought fearfully about the kennel, and that this was too much, since such a thing was completely unacceptable for a sacred animal. He was about to enter into a conversation with Argos, when Fenrir had suddenly said that she didn't mind, and that it would be easier for her in a cramped space. Meanwhile, Luna said that if something was missing, he could tell her right away. Alice asked what her name was. Luna replied that her name was Poki. Everyone turned their attention to her, and Luna said that she was elegant, noble, and beautiful, therefore Pochi. Isn't it a beautiful name? Yuno thought, is she serious now? The protagonist hesitantly asked if they should choose something else. Fenrir refused and added that it was easy to remember. The protagonist joined the conversation and said that it definitely didn't suit her now. Didn't she forget that she was a god and mistress of the forest? Fenrir replied that it wasn't up to her to decide, and she liked the girl, so she would give her the freedom to choose. Fenrir wagged her tail, and Luna said contentedly that if she was wagging her tail, it meant she liked the name. Yuno looked at them in bewilderment and wondered what kind of feeling of defeat this was. Alice hugged Fenrir and said that she also loved Pochi. The protagonist sighed contentedly and, noticing Athena standing to the side, called out to her. He asked if she wanted to pet her too. She was surprised and hesitantly asked if she could. Fenrir lay down on the ground and Athena gave in to Yuno. Meanwhile, in the residence of Marquise Rose, Alice was practicing her skills on the training ground. After finishing her training, she let her hair down and said that this power is achieved only by pronouncing it out loud. But this is not enough, and she needs to learn to do it non-verbally. After all, it was unknown when something like this would happen again. She remembered how Athena had asked Yuno and wondered if she would ask him the same way. Would he answer her? She changed her mind and shook her head, saying that she did not want him to protect her. Alice sadly lowered her head, when suddenly Claude appeared in the window and asked if he could come. She was scared and agreed. The man said that he had received a request from her mother and that she should come to her after training. Alice warned him that she was already on her way. Meanwhile, the president of the Ferris Magic Knight Academy, Selena Barrett, was walking down the corridor. She stopped near the tall door and, gathering her courage, opened the door. In the middle of the room there was a table, at which Lloyd was sitting. He smiled and expressed his respect for her punctuality. He thought that they could begin this meeting, which was held for selected people who wanted to cooperate with their school. Selena asked in confusion if they could light candles. They sat in silence for a while, but Lloyd broke the silence and said that they would first celebrate the return of their first years from the forest of magical creatures. He offered her a drink to this and raised his glass, saying, "To the sacred protection of the gods and her health." Selena looked at the glass with the drink hesitantly, and having made up her mind, they clinked their glasses and sipped the contents. She said that the demon attack had been without casualties, and this could only be explained by a blessing from above. Therefore, if there really was sacred protection, then a toast was quite appropriate. Lloyd smiled and said, "About the Day of Judgment." Selena did not understand him and asked for forgiveness in a questioning tone. The vice president asked if she was testing him. She was a smart girl, not to know what the Day of Judgment was, so pretending would not suit her. Selena hesitated and thought that she simply didn't hear what he said because he spoke quietly. She smiled and said, as expected from him, "Of course it was not a test. Hadn't he heard? There was a restraining order on the case of the Forest of Magical Creatures. Or rather, not the fact that on the day the demon army attacked near the freshman camp, there was a battle between gods there. Wasn't this information only available to him as a member of the Mars family representing the dark side of their kingdom?" Lloyd laughed and answered as expected of the student council chairman who stood at the top of the school, and the princess of the Scarlet Sword, the heir to one of the 4 great noble families, Duke Barrett. Her keen eyesight, able to look beyond the boundaries of darkness, worthy of admiration. Selene thanked him and thought about how she wanted to go home. Lloyd mentioned the name of the evil god Noah and said that the name of this god was not in the manuscripts of the Mars family. His strength surpasses Fenrir himself, and someone said that he can compare with the goddess Asteroth. Selene asked what else he knew about him. Lloyd mentioned Noah's Ark. Selena jumped up from the table in surprise and asked, "Can't it be? He wants to say that the popular fairy tale and what's happening now are somehow connected?" He replied that anything was possible. After a long silence, he said that they would talk about something else. Selena asked with displeasure, "Is he kidding me? After all, you can't just talk about such things and then change the subject." Lloyd replied that it was better not to know some things, especially since the tournament was starting soon. She sighed heavily and thought he seriously started talking about something else. He said that the student council consists of the 3 best students from each class. Among the freshmen, Alice took first place in the entrance exams, and Crime took second place. They both received invitations to join the council and also third place, the winners of the tournament next month. Selena asked, "Doesn't he have anyone in mind by any chance?" Lloyd said that there was and asked who he was if it was not a secret. He said that he did not want to upset her, but it was not her sister. Selena was upset and thought that his love for such a depressing atmosphere irritated her, but he was quite experienced. Even despite the obvious answer, she still hoped. Lloyd asked, "She knew who he was thinking about, right?" She agreed with him. He asked if she wanted to guess who it was. Selena, with a smile on her face, asked him to say at the same time, and the winner would be Yuno. Athena hugged Fenrir and exclaimed, "She is so soft and fluffy, like a cloud." Yuno smiled and thought that he was happy, because everyone was happy. He does not try to justify himself for those actions in the forest, but Kami, Luna, and Alice are smiling. After all, this is exactly what he wanted to see. He shed a tear and turned away asking, "Is someone cutting onions?" Fenrir mentally asked him where he was going. Yuno pretended nothing happened and answered, he was going to the toilet. Fenrir said that she also realized this. People started paying attention to him. Yuno asked if it was true, and Fenrir noted that she would protect him if he was suddenly left alone. The protagonist exhaled easily and thought, in any case, now is not the time to cry. Sometime later in the arena of the Ferris Magic Academy, the students watched in surprise as the protagonist was supported by Athena, who used her skill. A bright light emanated from her and exclaimed, "She did it. Now she can not only float in the air but also glow." MC smiled and said that everything went great and she looked simply divine. This is another sign that her strength has grown. Athena looked at her hands and said, "Divine power." Yuno looked at her questioningly and asked, "Is something wrong?" She became embarrassed and asked, "Can she help him with something?" He agreed and said that if Kami were nearby, he could walk at night in peace. They looked at each other with admiration, not noticing how the other students looked at them with displeasure. Yuno laughed and said, he also needs to train before the tournament, so he will return to the exercises. Maru watched them from the sidelines with displeasure. Suddenly, the protagonist heard someone asking, "Is that rumor true? They say that the goddess Athena drove away the blue meteor." Someone's voice displeasedly ordered him to think about what he says, otherwise he will regret it. After all, this is just nonsense. Yuno thought that their positions are reasonable, but the order spoils everything. Anyway, Kami's divine powers are developing, which means that the witnesses of those events are spreading rumors about the goddess Athena. He thinks that his improvisation was a success. Maru called out to him and muttered, "It seems that he is in a good mood today." Yuno wished him a good morning with a smile. Maru smiled slyly and asked, Was it really that fun at the camp? What happened to the previous protagonist who caused everyone trouble? The protagonist grabbed his head in bewilderment and apologized to him. Maru asked displeasedly, is he really kidding? Alice, Luna, and all the other fools standing behind him do not see reality. He does not see the greatness that should come from an idiot who made a contract with a god, but still achieved nothing. Although in reality, there is nothing surprising in this. Yuno called out to him displeasedly and said that he better stop. Maru continued speaking. After all, he and this goddess are complete failures. Suddenly, he fell to the ground unconscious, and the students exclaimed that he lost consciousness. Athena came to them and tried to call him. The protagonist replied that he had become too hot-tempered. He raised his hand and asked Soleil for permission to let him carry him to the infirmary. Sensei agreed, and Athena asked, will he be okay? The protagonist threw Maru over his shoulder and turned to Athena, said that he needed to leave and she would stay with Alice. Or maybe she wanted to join. Athena refused, upset, and said that she had things to do. Yuno said that he would be back soon, and Soleil asked him if it was hard for him. He replied, a little, but he could handle it. The teacher passed by him and asked him not to overdo it. After a while, they were walking to the infirmary and Yuno apologized to him, no matter why he insulted Athena, but he will forgive him. He was different before. The protagonist opened the door to the office and apologized and asked, is there anyone here? He will put him somewhere. He pulled back the curtain of the ward and noticed Lloyd sitting on the windowsill. Yuno looked at him in surprise and wondered if there was a pretty boy aura around him, or was it just that smell? Lloyd smiled and said, it's funny, what is this if not fate? The protagonist noticed how he was bandaging his wrists and asked, did he cut himself? Lloyd replied that it was just a seal. Yuno put Maru on the bed and thought, apparently he had a serious injury and he should not mess with him. He quickly walked to the door and said, if he doesn't mind, he will quickly leave. Suddenly Lloyd said the name of the evil god and MC immediately stopped near the door. He asked, he had met him, hadn't he? A new legend, a real god. Yuno asked fearfully, what was he talking about? Lloyd answered how loyally he followed the order and introduced himself to him, asking if he had heard of such a thing. The protagonist thought, Mars, if he remembered correctly, his family was full of secrets and mysteries, holding important positions in the kingdom. The protagonist said that he had heard of him. Lloyd added that the Mars family was responsible for all events related to the gods in this country. They monitor and record each of them. And the conflict between the gods Asteroth and the divine beast Fenrir was just one of them, as well as the statement of the evil god Noah. He said that he would ask with his permission, how did he think the god appeared to everyone? The protagonist asked in confusion, what do you mean, what kind of god? He thought about how much he knew about him and what he wanted to achieve. Lloyd smiled and asked what kind of god. He was curious to know what others thought about it. The protagonist hesitantly said that he was very scary and even the holy sword seemed like helpless babies in comparison to him. Lloyd asked him a counter question. What did he look like? The protagonist answered, a man with silver white hair and blue eyes, in a black cloak, and behind his back were snow-white wings. Lloyd pointed at him with his index finger and asked what he thought when he saw him. Did he think that he was handsome? Yuno agreed and Lloyd giggled contentedly and said that he knew that his answer would be exactly like that. After all, hearing about Noah's appearance, he felt a huge surge of strength. Finally, a god was found with whom he could make a contract. MC was surprised and said, because Noah is an evil god. Lloyd agreed and added that it just so happened that Noah was different from everyone else. Yuno added that it was he who organized the demon's attack on the camp and the children's lives were put at risk. Lloyd interrupted him and asked if he really thought so. He thought that he needed to calm down and remain cool, especially now. Did he feel a lie? Yuno asked, what was the truth for him? Lloyd noted that the attack was carried out by Fenrir, and the goddess Asteroth was able to fight him off, so this was the most reasonable version. The protagonist angrily clenched his fist and thought, after all, nothing worked. Lloyd asked contentedly, was he disappointed by his words? But he did not like such convenient plots, because legends should be thought out, complex, and at the same time beautiful. They will stop at the fact that neither Fenrir nor the blue meteor were the instigators of the demon's attack. Yuno thought that he finally understood what he wanted to tell him, and asked, did it work? Lloyd did not let him finish and answered, all this was done by the goddess Asteroth. Because that was the truth. He thought that maybe this meeting was destined by fate. Meanwhile, Selena approached the bulletin board and exclaimed, finally, this is all the news about the upcoming tournament. All that remains is to process all the participants and count their number in order to make pairs for the tournaments. And will the judges be, maybe ask the first years? The students looked at the announcements on the bulletin board and exclaimed, finally, information about the tournament. It will start soon. Selena approached her classmates and asked if they will participate. She wished them good luck in the upcoming tournament and asked how the preparation was and if they were worried. The boy agreed happily and said that he was working hard to become a winner. His classmates smiled uncertainly and said how confident he was. Alice and Crime, the two best of their class, are not allowed to participate in the competition. Then the tournament is a great opportunity to demonstrate their strength. The only rival left is Lucas, and everyone is betting on him. Perhaps joining the council will no longer be a dream if he does not screw up. The student said that he does not think everything will go so smoothly. Selena watched them and smiled and said, "Great, that's the attitude they needed." She wished them luck, and the students thought in admiration how cute she was. Selena moved on, but she could still hear what the boys were talking about. One of them asked why he was talking to her. A student asked what he said. A boy asked if he remembered her little sister. Both Serena and her sister Tina were running for student council. The student grabbed his head in fear and said that he had completely forgotten about her. The boy smiled awkwardly and said that the way he spoke about the Duke's youngest daughter was extremely disrespectful, especially to someone who belonged to one of the four great families. But he couldn't blame him, since he himself was barely restraining himself from comparing her to her. Selena noticed that Athena was heading somewhere along the path and wondered where she was going. She remembered Lloyd's words about Yuno being the winner, and he wanted to hear her opinion on the matter. Selena replied that she wondered why he was called incompetent for 3 reasons. First, her teacher Ray lectured her on his potential. Second, the lonely moon chose him as her knight. And third, the results of the entrance exam. He was the first to pass the written exam perfectly since the Academy's foundation, but his practical skills score was below average. His intelligence level was higher than theirs at his age. Lloyd said that he could not deny it, but it was all suspicious. Selena asked why. He replied that he obviously surpassed them in intelligence, which raised the pressing question. He made a contract with a wandering god, and that was the first thing that caught his eye. He was despised as the most incompetent member of the Asteroth family ever. But his actions were too superficial for someone with his level of intelligence. Selena wondered why she had to make a contract then. Lloyd said he had 3 offers. The first was to develop his abilities until he made a contract with a wandering god. The second was to make a contract with a god and gain enough power. Selena asked what the third was. Lloyd twirled his finger at his temple and said he was just an idiot. She asked if he wanted to see it with his own eyes. Lloyd shook his head and added that there was no need. Meanwhile, Selena continued to follow Athena and thought that the tournament result would decide everything, even if they didn't meet him. She would look forward to that day. A wise man keeps talents in reserve, right? Could the hero goddess Asteroth cause such chaos? The protagonist said it was impossible, since she had saved the world before. Lloyd asked who saved Asteroth then. Of course, he himself had never been saved. Yuno was surprised and wondered if they could find a common language with him. Lloyd asked if he had ever thought about whether the world was supposed to be like this. Just existing alone, had he ever thought that he was in the world's favor? The protagonist turned to him abruptly and thought, in the world's favor? He had thought about it all the time. Since he was born, he had abandoned the principles of this world. Zeus congratulated him on his birthday and added that he wanted to make a contract with him. He tried not to think about it, to convince himself that it was all because of the power Zeus had given him. Regardless of the knowledge he had acquired, he had never found an answer to the question. Yuno asked him if it was really free? Zeus replied that it was all for free. But why was he born with a full consciousness? Lloyd smiled and said that he knew about his reaction. They had something in common. They had their own opinions on this matter, and even ideals, so no one understood them. All his life he had questioned the world from the moment he was born until now. Yuno called out to him and asked what would happen to a person if he made contact with a wandering god. If he praised her as a heroine, it didn't mean she couldn't cause chaos. If the gods and the world got worse, they would take matters into their own hands. It was easier said than done, but even then, as long as his will was strong and he had like-minded people, they would be able to overcome any obstacle. Even in such a dark world, he believed that dawn would come. Just like the evil god Noah challenged the entire world that night, there are no nights without dawns. Lloyd smiled and said that he was interesting, so 100 points to him. Energy appeared around his hand, and suddenly a book was formed from it. Yuno was surprised and thought about how much energy there was. Then he asked, "Is this a book?" Lloyd handed it to the protagonist and said that the secrets of this world are written here. MC noticed a black circle on the paper of the book and asked, "What is this drawing?" Lloyd said that this is the herald of the end, the last moment. The black circle is the power of darkness, or a conspiracy. In other words, The future of this world is predicted, and it will be nothing more than a multitude of conspiracies. He needs a comrade to help prevent this, the same as himself. Yuno thought, the same as he understood. Lloyd began to giggle and said that he hasn't felt like this for a long time. He always knew that he was unusual, but not to this extent. The protagonist thought that he did not understand what was happening, but he once thought that he was having fun. Lloyd extended his hand and invited him to become his comrade from this day on. Yuno smiled and thought, the same thing is happening to him. His existence is undeniable. To create a world worthy of the goddess Athena. MC shook his hand and said to rediscover himself. He is the third son of the Asteroth family. Lloyd said that he is the second son of the Mars family and also the vice president of the student council. The protagonist was surprised and asked, the student council, the vice president, and the second place of the academy. Lloyd chuckled and said, he still didn't know and found it funny. He asked that their conversation about the apocalypse remain between them. He has yet to tell the chairman about it. Yuno said that he won't tell anyone and thought that since it was his, he could share a secret that he couldn't tell anyone even if he wanted to. The protagonist said the name Zeus and asked if he had heard of that name. When suddenly, Lloyd used a skill and bound his body with strings and asked where he heard of that name. Yuno wondered if the strings were a puppet technique or a weapon for killing. He was careless and didn't make anything up when he saw him. Before that, he smelled blood, since this man is not afraid of spilling blood. It seems that Mars's blood flows in his veins more than he thought. Lloyd said that he was repeating himself again. How did he know the name Zeus? He squeezed him with strings and ordered him to answer. Yuno asked, how did he know his name? Lloyd answered because Zeus was a name he made up for a strong god. He looked at him and then added that he had good taste in names. Yuno thought with displeasure. He got out of it perfectly. Keep it up. Lloyd walked away from him and said that he had reacted too impulsively and apologized. The protagonist smiled and thought, there was no doubt that Mars knew something about Zeus. He should not pry into this matter and needed to earn his trust, so he would act carefully. He complimented him on how great his technique was. Lloyd said that with his intelligence, he probably guessed that his family, including himself, were the dark side. He had trained specifically to learn this skill, so his surprise was understandable. The protagonist asked in confusion, the dark side? Lloyd said that maybe he would tell him about it someday. Although, if he couldn't defend himself from such an attack, then he had no place in the student council, not to mention being unique. And if he wanted, he could show him his power. The protagonist chuckled and he asked, did he ask something funny? Suddenly, MC was next to him and almost hit him. He asked, did he foresee that he would do that? Lloyd chuckled and said, so that's what he's capable of. He knew that he wouldn't fall for it and he liked him more and more. Yuno said that he liked his praise. Maru woke up and asked where he was. Lloyd pushed the protagonist to the floor and he asked why he was doing this. He said that it could be an assassin from an enemy group. MC asked him to wait and exclaimed that it was his classmate and he saw him carrying him here. Lloyd whispered, what is he saying? He ordered him to be quiet, otherwise they would be heard. Maru looked questioningly at the curtain and moved it aside and asked, what's going on? He looked at Lloyd, who was sitting on top of Yuno, in surprise. Maru asked in confusion, what are they doing? The protagonist smiled awkwardly and asked if he wanted to join in. After that, the rumor that Yuno was a male lover spread like wildfire. Meanwhile, Yuno and Athena were walking through the academy courtyard and the boys shouted for them to look there because this was Astario's third son. He never thought that he was really into boys, and he heard that Maru was the only witness to this. The main thing is not to look him in the eyes, otherwise he will get angry. His weapon is a spear. Maybe that's why he chose it? Yuno thought about how he would kill Maru the next time they met. Who knew that everything would turn out like this? He was already incompetent, distant, and a tyrant. And then this. Athena called out to the protagonist, and he asked her what was wrong. She hesitated and asked if he liked boys. Yuno thought that Maru was definitely a corpse now, and said that he definitely liked girls. There wasn't a second that he didn't think about girls. Athena exclaimed happily. She knew it was true. Alice thought with displeasure that Yuno had caused quite a stir while she was gone. Ayn called out to her and asked in confusion if it was true that MC and Lloyd were dating. She found it hard to believe, but she knew the truth. Could she tell her anything? Alice fearfully asked her to calm down and asked if she had asked him anything. As she understood, it was a misunderstanding, so there was no need to worry so much. Ayn asked, so it was a misunderstanding? She exhaled easily and said, that's good. Alice remembered how Ayn treated Yuno well and apologized for being so blunt and asked if she liked him. Ayn agreed and said that she was actually glad to have the opportunity to talk about it with her. She became embarrassed and added that she thought Yuno and Crime were the most perfect couple. Alice asked in confusion, what? Ayn said that one night during the training camp, She saw Yuno and Crime secretly meeting. At first, she didn't believe it, but then by chance, did it really happen by chance? She heard their conversation and felt embarrassed to say it here, coming from the boys' bathroom. And from that moment on, she was completely convinced that the protagonist and Crime were the perfect couple. Alice called out to her and asked, what was she talking about? Nine happily apologized to her and said that she didn't mean to talk so much. Then she would explain everything in detail. She mentally apologized to Yuno and said that it seems she won't be able to cover for him. Meanwhile, the protagonist and Athena were walking down the hallway of St. Ferris Girls' Academy. She asked if he had a class here today. The protagonist agreed and said that today was a joint class and they were on their way to OG's class. He stopped near the classroom and exclaimed, "Here is Luna's class." Athena asked if he would mind if she took a walk. MC asked if she would be bored. She happily said that she wanted to look around this castle and waved her hand as a sign of goodbye. Yuno asked her not to follow suspicious people. When suddenly Athena was surrounded by girls and admiringly asked her how she was and what she was doing here. The protagonist smiled and said that it was much safer here than in the Night Academy. He entered the classroom and noticed that the surroundings were clean. He whispered, "Now where is Luna's place?" And of course, it is not so difficult to find her. He walked up to her desk and apologized for taking up space. Suddenly, everyone turned to look at him in surprise. Yuno thought apparently the rumors had spread even to the girls' academy. Although, maybe he was just imagining things. There was more surprise in their eyes than disdain. Luna smiled and said that he was quite popular. The protagonist asked in surprise, what was she saying? He was just thinking. She said that it was more important and wanted to ask a question if he didn't mind. Yuno looked at her questioningly and allowed her to ask the question. OG smiled and asked, "Does he like men?" The other girls in the class were surprised by the question. He awkwardly said that he didn't like them at all, and it was just an incredible misunderstanding. Luna asked, "What a pity," but not without a reason. "So what happened?" MC said that nothing happened and he was in the infirmary when Lloyd suddenly pushed him. It just so happened that Maru saw it happen. The girls cheered happily. That's what they thought. He's the one underneath. Yuno said with displeasure that it was a bit annoying. Luna added that he shouldn't worry and that she could assure him that their impression of him hadn't gotten any worse. The protagonist wondered what was wrong then. The atmosphere in the classroom was rather strange. OG said that he could think of it as their entertainment. This was an all-female academy, so there were a lot of girls constantly looking for some kind of entertainment. And then there were rumors about him and Lloyd, and it was obvious that they were interested. The protagonist said that he didn't see anything normal about it. It couldn't be. They were talking about him, right? Since when has there been so much interest around him? Luna said that she wasn't so sure about that. She thought that others looked at him a little differently after he became a knight, but didn't he think so? Besides, he himself wasn't that bad, even if he was a bit clumsy. Anyway, Lloyd even has his own fan club, and considering that the two of them were spotted, let's say, it became quite funny. Yuno thought that he was not at all sure, but he seemed to understand. So far, this is not the worst rumor, and he can rest easy knowing that Athena is not in any danger. He just will not rush to clarify the situation with the misunderstanding. Cecilia looked at him across the classroom, when suddenly something dawned on the protagonist. He thought of that blonde girl with 2 ponytails. She was the one who set the monsters on her. He called out to her and said, "That girl sitting in the front row." OG smiled slightly and whispered that it was Cecilia and that she was her benefactor. Meanwhile, Selena opened the door to Lloyd's office with all her might and asked what that meant. He looked at her and asked what she meant. Selena spread her arms wide and said that she thought he understood what she meant. He made it clear that he was not going to communicate with Yuno. Lloyd began to imitate her and Selena began to swear in displeasure. He said that even if he had no interest in this, he still would not have helped since he was sent here. Selena asked, "And what was sent here?" Lloyd smiled and added that it was fate. She exhaled heavily and said that in any case, it did not explain why he was so suddenly in a relationship with the protagonist. Are the two of them connected in this regard? Lloyd said that everything was going according to plan. He and Yuno became comrades in the infirmary. After all, he was similar to him. Selena asked in confusion, what were the two of them doing then? In that case, were their assumptions correct, and what were they going to do with him? Would they give him a position in the student council? Or was he going to include him in the disciplinary committee that he supervised from the outside? Lloyd concluded that she had misunderstood everything and, as he had already told her, Yuno had become his comrade. In other words, he considered him worthy of diving into the abyss of this world. Selena asked in surprise. Was he going to drag him into that organization? He ordered him to stop joking. What was he even thinking? Doesn't he know that dragging him into such danger could even kill him? Lloyd calmly said that he saw how incredibly wrong she was. Selena looked at him questioningly. He pointed his thumb at himself and added that the leader of that very dangerous, in her opinion, organization is he. Selena said in confusion that she was not sure she understood what he was talking about. And why drag along the ballast? Lloyd said with satisfaction that Yuno's true abilities had already surpassed that of a mere student. He thought that he was already at their level, if not above them. Selena asked in confusion, couldn't it be to that extent? She remembered her sister asking her older brother to look at her, and thought that maybe Yuno would be the person her younger sister needed. Selena watched her sister train, and then thought decisively that if she was going to make her move, now would probably be the best time. Meanwhile, at the girls' academy, the teacher pointed to the blackboard and said, to activate magic, the amount of magical energy needed for each rank has basically already been set. The magic formulas required to use magic also differ. Yuno looked away and thought about Luna's words. What does benefactor mean? Cecilia is the one who tried to put Luna through cruel trials. Normally, she would have been expelled for such madness, but they were still in the same class. It's probably because Luna didn't attach much importance to the goblin matter. The teacher continued to tell them that they had probably heard of Tier 10 magic at least once. Not only was it incredibly powerful magic, but it was also a miracle magic that could cost them their lives if cast. The protagonist looked at Oji and thought, from the moment they met until today, he thought he had understood it at least partially. But it looked like he still hadn't achieved it. Luna looked at him and asked, what was wrong? Yuno turned away and said, nothing. He looked at Cecily and thought that he hadn't expected this, and couldn't imagine that Maru of all people would become Cecily's knight. Suddenly, she looked at him, and MC abruptly turned his head to the side. After a while, the teacher announced the end of today's lesson and reminded the students that each of them had to review today's material for the exam. Yuno stretched and thought happily that it was finally over. Luna packed her bag and said that she felt like he was constantly looking at her during class. Maybe she was his type? The protagonist smiled and asked if she was serious. That was not the case. Luna remained silent, and Yuno looked at her questioningly. Cecilia walked up to him and said that it seemed like their knight was not the type to rely on. After all, she was surprised, and could it really be true that a loner like him deserved such a humble knight? Maru smiled maliciously and asked Luna if that was true. Meanwhile, in the backyard of the girls' academy, Athena looked around in admiration and exclaimed, there are so many flowers. The girls approached her and one of them asked how she was doing. What was she doing on such a beautiful day? Athena happily said that she was just going to take a walk until Luna's class finished their lesson. This garden is very beautiful. The students smiled and said that it was such an honor to hear from her that she liked it. She could feel at home. Athena thanked them very happily. Meanwhile, in the classroom, Cecilia asked, perhaps such loners can only count on knights like him, right? Unlike Yuno, her knight is the second son Byrne, who is good at magic. The protagonist thought that he had a feeling that all this would become a huge problem. He would first see how Luna would answer. She smiled faintly and stood up from her desk, walked past her and called Yuno to follow her. He thought, this is his mistress, to just ignore him. But anyway, he already knows that this will be a terrible decision. Cecilia grabbed her arm viciously and shouted at her to stop breaking down. Her bag fell to the floor and everyone turned their attention to them. Luna said indifferently that this is definitely not something she does. So, could she please let go already? She would just like to go home. Cecilia swung her hand at Luna when Yuno suddenly stopped her and said that she had gone too far. If she continued, it would only damage her reputation. Cecilia pulled her arm out of his grasp and said, at least this will be for the best. He looked at Luna and thought, has she gone crazy? All her actions and words are chaotic. What happened between them? Cecilia asked with a grin, Luna must be enjoying herself? She constantly harasses her, having an ace up her sleeve, the ability to expel her from this academy at any time convenient for her. Luna confidently asked, by that ace she means those goblins? She can be sure that she is not going to tell her father or the academy about this. Cecilia sarcastically asked, that is why it irritates her so much, and that she should be grateful? Luna smiled and said, no way, because in fact, she is the one who should be grateful to her. Thanks to her, she was able to cross paths with the best knight she has ever met. Simply put, she is her benefactor. The protagonist watched this and thought, it is strange, since Luna cannot contain her irritation. But what she feels is partially justified. In this situation, it is clear that Cecilia is wrong and too proud. Perhaps what is slowly smoldering inside her is a deep envy of Luna. Cecilia looked at Yuno and asked with a grin, the best knight? The first talentless descendant in the history of the Asteroth family, he is the best knight in her opinion? She asked to enlighten her, What makes this loser, without a drop of dignity, the best of all she found? Yuno exhaled heavily and thought. It started again. He was sure that Luna could handle this because she knew about his abilities. Luna laughed and muttered how pathetic she was. Not only the lack of manners and honor, but also the ability to judge others. Yuno was surprised and thought, why was she even making things worse? Cecilia smiled and asked, what was she saying? She thought that her knight would lose in a duel with her talentless one. Luna asked contentedly, did she really not know that her knight had already lost to her Yuno? Maru pointed his finger at the protagonist and exclaimed, he would not give him a chance. After all, the only reason he was able to defeat him in that mocking battle was because he found spears in the books. He assures her, there is no way he would lose if he didn't have a spear. The protagonist thanked Luna for the opportunity. But isn't she afraid that fighting outside the campus is prohibited by the Academy's rules? There will be a combat tournament soon anyway. Wouldn't it be better to decide everything during that? Maru called out to him and confidently asked, is he scared? Luna said calmly, indeed it is true. In the tournament arena, the victory will be fair and it will be a good opportunity to show Yuno's strength. She hopes that her knight can get through the rounds unscathed. Cecilia said that she wanted to warn them that Maru made a contract with a god of a high enough rank. On the other hand, this may be a disadvantage for her knight, but will they check it? The protagonist asked, who is this high-ranking god? Maru laughed and added, of course he would tell him that. He would make him cry right there in the arena, just like he wanted. He better prepare for this. MC wondered if Maru had made a contract? Equalizing the forces would make the fight more entertaining. Cecilia looked at him and said that she couldn't understand his situation. She never thought that someone from the prestigious Ferris Magic Academy for Knights would decide to make a contract with a strange deity, and it was a little surprising. Her name was Athena, right? She doubts he'll get much benefit from foolishly entering into a lifelong contract with someone as weird as her. As she thought, mediocrities are best suited for mediocrities. Suddenly, the protagonist attacked her and scared her with force, saying that if she said one more word, he would never forgive her. Cecilia fell to the floor in fear, and Maru went to her to help. The protagonist called Luna with him, and after leaving the office, they noticed Athena standing near the wall. Yuno called out to her and thought about Cecilia's words, wondering if she could accidentally overhear what they were talking about inside. Athena happily exclaimed that they needed to hear it. She had been on a really long walk. Did he know that the Academy's garden had a lot of beautiful flowers and different colors, and there was also a flower with a pattern that she had never seen before. In addition, some of them are rare and can only be seen in the Academy, and the kind gardener told her a lot about it. Yuno happily asked, then maybe she would like to take another walk with him? He would like to see the garden she was talking about. Athena was happy and agreed. After the walk, the three of them went back to the Flame Estate, and Athena smiled during their entire journey. She added that she found an amazing place where a strong stream of water shoots upward. Luna asked, was she probably talking about the fountain? Athena replied that this is most likely so. The protagonist stayed behind them and thought about how he would win in such a way that no one would call his goddess worthless anymore. He would win the tournament with his power, and no one would be able to mock them anymore. A couple of days later, the weather was bad outside, and Maru was sitting on a chair in the office. He nervously twitched his leg and thought, still no. How much longer will they make him wait? Maru calmed down a little, when suddenly he angrily overturned the table and looked at the window. He asked, why scare him? When suddenly, the room plunged into darkness and the candle flame went out. Maru put his hand forward and wondered if the roof was leaking or something. Were they looking down on him, these damned orphards? Or were they just mocking him? First they tell him that he can make a contract with a high-ranking god, and then they make him wait here for 6 hours all alone. What do they even think of him? He is the great Maru of the Earl's House of Bern. Suddenly, the chair disappeared from under him and he fell to the floor, feeling the taste of iron in his mouth. He looked to the side with his peripheral vision and saw Malfas' shadow in front of him. He apologized to him for making him wait and turning into a human. Maru looked at him in fear. Malfas sat down on the chair and with a smile on his face asked, what happened? Did he see something terrible? Why doesn't he sit down? He has been waiting for him for so long, right? Maru looked at his hand in fear and wondered what happened. Malfas apologized again and said that he had urgent business, which is why he arrived so late. This was quite a headache and asked him to get straight to the point. Maru asked in confusion, to the point? Malfas asked, does he want to make a contract with him? He looks like he ruined his mood, so he thought it would be better to get straight to the point. Maru, upset, told him to forget about the incident. Malfas smiled and added that the past would be in the past. It would be better that way. Then maybe they should begin the contract ceremony? He extended his hand and Maru gave in to him. Suddenly, Malfas pulled his hand back and said that first he had a question he wanted to ask him. Maru asked uncertainly. What was it? Malfas added that he was currently collecting information on cases of strange deities. Did he know that humans usually hated them because he could not pretend not to see the problems of his fellows? That was why he came and offered them his protection. Maybe he knew something? Maru said that there is a former stray goddess who is in the academy he is studying at. Malfas asked, by former he means that she has already made a contract with someone? He agreed and added that it was with one of the idiots from his class. Malfas smiled madly and asked if maybe he happened to know her name now? Maru added that her name was the goddess Athena. Suddenly, Malfas laughed madly and exclaimed how wonderful it was that his hypothesis was confirmed. He always thought that such a scenario was too perfect to be a coincidence. Perhaps this was why Asteroth made her move herself. Maru called out to him in confusion. He apologized and said that they stopped in the middle of the ceremony, so he was looking forward to working with him. MC walked through the academy building and thought about how Athena had been acting a little strange lately. She was used to following him everywhere, but lately she was walking alone a lot. Could it be that she was avoiding him herself? He needed to calm down first. After all, Athena was a deity, and they had their sacred duties that they definitely needed to fulfill. He is sure that she just went out and does these errands in a place he does not know. And today, what she said happened. Athena came to him and said that she will go out and do her own thing until the end of class. Yuno smiled and said that if she needs to do her own thing, then nothing can be done. He grabbed his head in confusion and thought, but what kind of errands are these? Errands are things that need to be done? After class, the protagonist walked in the yard and thought about how he can't help just by thinking about reasons. Maybe he should just directly ask Athena about it? He thinks that he should go and find her. It so happened that his class ended early, so the best time to find out what is really going on. Suddenly, Yuno bumped into Selena's chest and asked in surprise, what happened? Selena looked at him questioningly. MC walked away from her in fear and apologized. She smiled and said that she was the one who should apologize and she should have called him out. She followed him for a bit, and it seemed like he was deep in thought about something, right? The protagonist awkwardly thanked her and Selena asked what for. She slightly bent down to look into his eyes and smiled. Yuno watched her in surprise and asked what was wrong. He looked at her questioningly and thought, who is this girl? Selena added that he had beautiful eyes, a perfect copy of her. She wanted to ask him something, and could he please listen to her? Yuno thought in confusion that she had a completely different physique, not like Luna and Alice even though they were the same age, but radiated a charm that included the charm of an adult woman despite the fact that she was still growing. In other words, for someone like him who prefers more mature ladies, this sister is completely his ideal type. He suddenly thought, asking for a favor from someone you've just met is a little suspicious. Unfortunately for her, he completely trusts his intuition in situations like this. He apologized in his mind, as he had to politely refuse. Selena sheepishly apologized for showing up so suddenly. She hoped she wasn't bothering him. The protagonist bowed sharply and added that he was completely at her service. Selena laughed and said that he was weird. Yuno knelt down and thought contentedly. These are the moments when the adorable sister suddenly shows such an innocent smile, and he loves it. This is a complete and utter defeat. She introduced herself and said that she was a third year. MC thought about how he felt like he had heard that name somewhere before. Selena pointed her index finger forward and asked that she knew that all this was a bit sudden. But could he agree to go with her right now? Yuno called out to her admiringly and asked her to wait a minute. He is currently in the process of searching for his goddess, so can he come to her after that? Selena asked, by goddess he means Athena? She asked him not to worry and just go with her. MC looked at her questioningly and thought, why not worry? Meanwhile, they were walking through the forest, which was not far from the academy. Yuno looked at her and thought, where's she going? The place is deserted. Most likely they have already left the academy territory. Did Athena really reach this place? Elena called out to him and told him to watch his steps from now on. The protagonist asked in confusion, what? How was he suddenly left alone and looking around thought, did she disappear? She erased all signs of her presence with the help of magic. She probably used silent high-level illusion magic. Perhaps out of all the high school students, Selena is the most talented. She turned to him and winked contentedly. After a while, they arrived at the place and hid behind the bushes. Yuno noticed Athena and wondered what she was doing in the middle of this strange place. Athena was trying her best to use her skills, but it wasn't that easy. The protagonist stared at her and thought, this is great. Did she really come here to train all the time? Sweet and shining Athena. He remembered her words and went back in time, when she had nothing to offer in return. Yuno still chose her to be by her side. Now that he thinks about it, Athena herself began to walk alone after the campaign. Athena put her hands on the tree trunk and her whole body was filled with magical energy. Selena asked him if he was calm now. MC agreed and admitted that he was surprised by such news. He thanked her for telling him about it. Selena smiled and replied that she was glad that everything was fine. Yuno called out to her and said about the request she had mentioned earlier. Suddenly, he noticed Tina training and thought, doesn't this girl have the same hair color as Selena? What's more disturbing is what kind of inexplicable moves she uses. Selena called him and said that she had a favor to ask. She approached him and asked if he would be her sparring partner. The protagonist asked shyly, who is she? Selena introduced her sister and added that he and she were the same age. A first year at Ferris Magic Knight Academy, she is her beloved younger sister. Tina sheathed her sword and said that she refuses. Selena looked at her in confusion and asked, but why? If she really wants to improve her skills as a combat mage, then obviously a sparring partner is much more useful, right? Tina firmly replied that she appreciated her concern, but her goal was to win the competition and get into the student council. She trained hard to achieve this goal. Anyway, everything would be meaningless if he was her sparring partner. Yuno watched them with confusion and thought, can we go home already? He just wanted to go back to the goddess. Selena came close to her and asked her to listen carefully with a displeased expression. She knew Yuno who was behind her. Right now, he was the most suitable candidate to join the student council. Tina looked at him seriously and exclaimed, this can't be true. He was the third son of the Asteroth family and he can't handle either a sword or magic. That is, he is notorious for being bad at everything. The protagonist thought that her feigned caution hurt him even more. Although he was sure that deep down she was still a good girl. At least she was better than Maru, and more importantly, why did Selena say that? She sighed lightly and asked her sister if she thought that way about him. Then why not see for herself? She suggested that they have at least one small fight, before she actually says that he is not suitable for her training. MC was surprised and asked what was going on. Tina asked him to ask her permission to know one thing. When she said that this guy Yuno is the most likely candidate to join the student council, was that her personal opinion? Or was she saying that because she is the student council president? It dawned on the protagonist and he thought, the student council president? Selena smiled and asked, well, who knows? Although Lloyd said the same thing to her, Tina asked in surprise, did he say that himself? Yuno thought that the mystery was finally solved, and it all looked like Lloyd had planned it. Maybe Selena heard about what happened in the infirmary. He remembered Lloyd's words and thought, if that was the case, then he needed to do something. He would show the student council president his ability to control the spear. Tina picked up the sword from the ground and invited MC to fight, and then she would show him the result of her training. The protagonist looked at the sword that was lying behind her and asked, is she going to use that sword? Tina cleared her throat and asked, is he planning something? She guessed that it wouldn't help him. She asked permission to show him something special. She handed him the sword and told him to try holding it. It was heavy. Then she gave him another sword to hold and asked expectantly, how did he like it? Yuno asked in confusion, what is this for? Tina smiled and exclaimed, lightness. Can't he feel it? It seemed like he understood everything just by looking at her face. That's right. All this time she had been training with a sword that was magically strengthened to the point that it became incredibly heavy. But for this fight, she would take a wooden sword, which would make the fight easier for her. Selena chuckled awkwardly. Tina raised the tip of her sword to the sky and asked her to just look at how much she had grown. Yuno thought that she had taken a somewhat mystical stance. He turned to Selena and asked if she really wanted this. She looked at him and said that Tina was serious, and he should take that into account. Tina swung her sword at him, and Yuno looked around to find a long stick. He picked it up from the ground when Selena suddenly noticed Malfas' presence. Tina attacked him again and again, but Yuno deftly dodged and thought, well, what should he do now? Choosing to lose is not an option, especially since she doesn't have anything special in her hand. Selena thoughtfully watched their duel. Tina asked contentedly, all he can do is dodge her blows? But it will end now. The protagonist looked at her questioningly, after which her body and sword were engulfed by powerful energy. She smiled and exclaimed that he should prepare to experience the most powerful special attack she had ever done. She used the light slash skill and rushed to attack. Yuno was surprised and thought, light magic? It was the type of magic that rarely anyone used, which made him tired. But for some strange reason, he felt as if the blood in his body was starting to boil. Moreover, surprisingly, it was good. MC deftly swung a wooden stick and knocked the sword out of her hands, and it flew off with a ringing sound. Selena smiled and said that the duel was over. Tina asked in confusion, it couldn't be, she lost? The protagonist looked at her and thought that in a blow-by-blow battle, the deciding factor is how big the difference in the weapons reaches. Naturally, as a swordsman, he must understand this and adapt, but she may be much more interesting than he previously thought. He looked at her questioningly and called out. MC walked up to Tina and asked fearfully, "Is she okay?" He didn't hurt her, right? Tina sat on the ground and clenched her fingers and said that her special attack was a light slash. She burst into tears from losing, and the protagonist awkwardly exclaimed that her special move was really cool. The fusion of her unique stance and light magic was. Tina tearfully said about the personal lessons from Lloyd and her path to becoming the strongest swordswoman in the world. Yuno wondered what that guy even told her. He turned around and called out to Selena, asking her what he should do. She took him by the shoulders and said with a smile that it was a guy's job to calm down a crying girl and wished him luck. The protagonist looked at her in confusion and wondered why he was being forced to do all this. Meanwhile, Athena, who was left out, continued to concentrate on her training. Selena soothingly patted Tin's hair and said that Yuno was strong enough. The protagonist looked at her with displeasure and thought that he was not that good at calming down crying girls. He did nothing wrong in principle. He looked towards the goddess and thought that what upset him more was that Athena was very close from here, and he did not have a chance to talk to her. MC turned to them and called out to Tin and asked if it was okay if he asked about something. She replied that everything was fine and he could just call her by her name. The protagonist asked how long Athena had been doing this. She replied that she didn't know for sure, but it was already there when she arrived. First, she seemed very absorbed in something, and she also seemed very determined. Yuno smiled and said that's how it is, but he likes people like that. He looked at her questioningly and Tina said, she may not be human, but the reason is still the same. Because she is one of those who tries to do her best. She turned to her older sister and apologized to her for not showing her best before. She will train even harder and asked her to continue to take care of her. She will definitely join the student council. Selena put her hand on her shoulder and said, but to keep her promise, she can't beat Yuno. Tina walked up to him and extended her hand to him, introducing herself and saying that she is the second daughter of the Barrett family. MC shook her hand in return and said that he is the third son of the Asteroth family. Tina apologized for saying rude things and asked if he would still agree to be her sparring partner. The protagonist agreed and Tina asked in surprise, really, and isn't he disappointed in her? Yuno asked, why should he? He smiled and said that he hoped for a pleasant cooperation with her. He thought, isn't it obvious? She spoke well of Athena, so he has no reason to be disappointed in her. Meanwhile, the squirrel was jumping on the branches and stopped, looking questioningly at Athena. She used the skill again when suddenly she scared the squirrel and it fell right on her. Athena frightenedly apologized to it and asked, did she scare it? The squirrel broke free from her hands and ran along the tree trunk. She remembered Yuno and said that she should return to the academy. She got up from the ground and looked questioningly into the thick of the forest. Meanwhile, Tina asked, is she talking about the spear? Selena said that she knows. She said so before, but she thinks the spear suits her better. She called out to Yuno and asked, isn't that right? The protagonist looked at her and said, perhaps because Tina's last strike was great. She has more potential in pinpoint strikes than in swinging a sword. Tina said, he means what Lloyd taught her before. Yuno asked, so she learned it from him? Tina swung her sword and agreed with admiration. It's called the way of the strongest swordsman under the heavens. This is the same sword style that Lloyd taught her. Isn't it cool? MC agreed and thought, it could be. Lloyd had a lot of unusual ideas and passed on some of those strange moves to Tina. And it doesn't look like she's just playing around. He wondered if there was anything else he told her about. Tina thought about it and said that it happened right after she started attending the academy. During training, Tina fell to the ground and her sword stuck in a tree trunk. The student asked, what was that noise? They approached the bushes and noticed her. The boy wondered if she was the loser from the Barrett family. He felt sorry for her. Even if she tried her best, she would never catch up with her older sister. Tina turned to them and snatched the sword and said, if they have something to say, then let them say it right to her face, cowards. She looked at it and added that she would show them all. Lloyd was sitting on a tree branch and said that the wind was howling. Tina happily turned around and said, that voice, Lloyd. He asked, she was stuck in place, right? Tina asked in confusion, what? Lloyd jumped down from the tree and took out his blade and said, if she wanted to reach the next level, then he would teach her a few tricks. Tina asked in surprise, is that true? Lloyd said that he had never taught anyone this hidden and powerful sword style. He calls it the way of the strongest swordsman under the heavens. Lloyd raised his sword towards him and said, first, she needs to raise the sword as high as she can, as if piercing the sky, and then direct the strike straight at her enemy faster than the speed of light. Tina watched him in admiration and thought, he is so cool. Lloyd said at the end, the one who can swing the sword can also swing the spear. He asked her to learn what he taught her to become stronger. Tina clenched her hand into a fist and said, "That's what he said." Yuno thought it was a mistake to doubt Lloyd, even for a second. Selena wondered. She thought Lloyd also wanted to say that Tina is suitable for the spear style, right? Tina got upset and said, but she has never trained with a spear in her life. The protagonist looked at her questioningly. She remembered Athena and called out to Yuno. He asked in surprise, "What is it?" Tina approached him and asked, "He wasn't that strong to begin with, was he? So he became like this because of the skills he acquired?" Yuno said something like that. "It looks like that to everyone." Tina called out to her older sister decisively and said that she had changed her mind. He would make a contract with Athena. Yuno looked at her questioningly. He looked at his trembling hands and thought what to do. He could shout with joy at any moment. After all, the name of the goddess Athena had become quite recognizable in the academy. But the cruel reality is that not a single person has yet wished to make a contract, and finally, for the first time, Selena told her to do as she wishes. However, as her older sister, she must tell her. She walked up to her and whispered in her ear that the goddess Athena was originally a nameless wandering god. Simply put, making a contract with her now would be incredibly useless. Does she even understand that? The protagonist was upset and thought no matter how depressing it was, what Selena was saying was still a fact. In this world, most people were aiming to make a contract with a majestic deity, and it was obvious why everyone thought that way. Not to mention that they were still young. There was no need to rush into making a contract when it was only possible once in a lifetime. Tina exclaimed that she didn't see any problem with it. She had told her many times before, but she would say it again. Her goal was to get into the student council. And in order to do that, she decided that she urgently needed to receive a blessing. That was why she made it with a god like Athena. A god who would spare no effort. Yuno thought that this was the moment he made his choice. Athena came up behind him and called out to him. The protagonist turned around and apologized, asking if they had disturbed her. Athena shook her head. Yuno extended his hand to her and asked her to come to Tina. They looked at each other, when suddenly Tina got down on one knee and asked Athena to make a contract with her. Athena looked at her in surprise, then turned to Yuno and he smiled at her. She hesitantly said that she was still not good enough and her powers were weak. She would only burden him. Tina introduced herself and said that she was the incompetence of the Barrett family. Athena looked at her questioningly. Tina said with a smile on her face that she didn't have any friends yet, so she didn't care what anyone said about her. Athena cried out with tears in her eyes. Even so, Tina took her hands and said that she would spread her name and show everyone that she could really do it. Yuno covered his face with his hand, and Selena looked at him. Athena called out to Tina and said that then she would also try really hard. Tina sighed lightly and cried out, in that case, she would try much harder. Athena was confused and laughed with her. They extended their hands to each other, and Athena made a contract with her. The protagonist thought that this contract was something the goddess had achieved with her own efforts. She had been training in secret from others and was now receiving the results of her labors. He was proud of her. Selena smiled and said that she really couldn't do anything about it. Tina looked at her hands happily. Selena approached Yuno and whispered that he should take care of her sister. The protagonist smiled and agreed. And then he thought, as Selena had said, there was definitely little benefit in making a contract with someone like Athena. But that was only for now. He would not be shy and would use all his power to glorify Athena. That's why his move to prove that choosing Tina wasn't a mistake was right now. Yuno swore to her that she would not regret it. Aim for even greater heights. Tina and Athena happily held hands and smiled at each other. MC thought that on this very day, he got a new, valuable comrade. Meanwhile, in the manor, Tina and Yuno were training, when suddenly she fell to the ground. Yuno asked if she was okay. Maybe she should rest. He looked at her feet embarrassedly and turned away. Tina lay on the ground out of breath and said, "Finally." He called out to her and said, "Maybe she knows." Tina looked at him questioningly and asked, "What is it?" The protagonist turned back and told her to ignore him and just be herself. He thought about the day Tina made a contract with the goddess Athena. He decided that he would teach her the art of the spear. Since then, they trained together every day for the tournament. Luna asked, "Isn't this girl cute?" The protagonist was surprised and asked, "Does she know Tina?" Luna agreed and added that they had known each other since they were children. He should think about it himself. Tina was also a daughter of one of the 4 noble families, just like Luna. So it wasn't that surprising that the two had always known each other, was it? Luna exhaled heavily and said, even though they had never spoken. The protagonist asked in surprise, "Never at all?" Luna added that every time she was near, she ran away with a terrified expression. Yuno thought that he could understand why people would feel uneasy around Luna. She said, "Seriously, she was so cute." Yuno looked at her and thought, this was even surprising. He had no idea that a loner like Luna would think that way about Tina. Even though they had never spoken, she became embarrassed and said that the more she looked at her, the more she reminded her of a dog. The protagonist was surprised and thought, so she just didn't see her as a person. OG added that she wanted to drown her in her love, so why was she running away from her? Claude placed the cup on the table and said that she had a bright future ahead of her. Luna thanked him and he said that was true, since she always had many good qualities. And the increase, he admired how much she had improved in the past few days. Yuno looked at Claude and thought, considering that he himself, who was the former head of the Royal Knight Order, said so. Then Tina must really have talent. Ever since she started using a spear, her movements have improved noticeably. And of course, even if she acquired the ability to use a spear through a contract with the goddess Athena, she still needs to put in effort to master it. So it was not an exaggeration to say that this rapid growth was the result of Tina's hard work. In fact, there was only one thing left, and he remembered her words. Because she had been training alone all this time, she had almost no experience in actual combat. No matter how well she may have honed her skills, if she can't stand up for herself, fight against her opponent. He hopes that Tina can gain enough combat experience before the tournament starts. Once she has figured this out, then no doubt, but there is a problem, and he will have to fight against Tina in the finals. When will that time come? Tina called out to him and asked what he was just standing there and watching. She asked him to start training already. Luna took a cup in her hands and wished them a good time. Yuno smiled and looked at Tina and thought that she was a diligent and kind girl. So together with her, he feels that very soon the name of the goddess Athena will be known throughout the world. The time was approaching the tournament, but Yuno and Tina were constantly training in the mansion, improving their combat skills. After a while, Tina said goodbye to her sister and said that she was going. Selena shouted for her to be careful and come back before sunset. The woman said that she had never seen the lady so energetic before. Did she really have a friend? Selena smiled and said something like that. The woman called out to her and asked if she was sure that this was a good idea. She immediately covered her mouth and apologized since she was in no position to talk about such things. Selena thought that if she was with him, she was sure that everything would be fine, even though his back was turned to her. She felt like the tip of his spear was at her throat. With her back so unprotected, it would be a real fight. She would definitely make the first move. She couldn't even imagine what would happen after the first move. There was only one person who made her feel this way, and that was the righteous swordswoman, Rei. The real power that Yuno wielded was beyond her comprehension. Perhaps she was overestimating him because of what she had heard from Lloyd before. She remembered Tina's words, which Athena had said. She was sure she would be fine. Selena said she wouldn't worry so much about it if the protagonist's abilities were as good as she imagined. Meanwhile, 3 days before the tournament, at Baron Burns' estate, suddenly, the window in Maru's room broke, and he jumped out of bed in fear. He grabbed his head with his hand and said irritably, "Not again," because he couldn't even sleep peacefully. The butler asked him if something had happened. Maru shouted that he had nothing to worry about. He was just testing his new abilities. The man asked if he wanted to practice magic. Wouldn't it be more logical to do it in the garden when the day came? It's worth mentioning that he had been looking rather pale lately. Therefore, he would say that he needed a good night's sleep. Maru opened the door to his room a little and asked displeasedly, "Didn't he say that there was nothing to worry about?" The butler, frightened, apologized to him. Maru approached him and told him not to say a single unnecessary word to his father. He walked to the broken window and looked at his hand, satisfied that his body was not used to this. This is not a weak power that he received from Malfas. He is sure that he will be able to use it normally soon. He has always tried to the limits of his strength. The future of the Byrne family is on the second son. He cannot afford a mistake. No matter what, weakness is a sin. He must never associate himself with the weak, otherwise he will be infected. To become strong and inherit the famous Byrne family. Alice smiled at him and said how strong he is. He grabbed his head and said that he had already forgotten. He imagined Yuno in his mind and thought, after all, this guy. He gritted his teeth and swore that he would defeat him. Meanwhile, there was 1 day left until the tournament. This time, the morning opening began at the academy. Selena began her speech about how each participant came here for a different purpose. Some were trying to show a great result so they could make a contract with a powerful god. Others wanted to make a name for themselves and raise their families. Although everyone's aspirations were different, they all had the desire to win. They, the student council, wanted to respect the participants' tenacity and promised to hold the tournament faithfully so that everyone could compete until the very end without regrets. The students began to admire her, and Tina looked at her sister. She thought about how her sister looked so cool when she went into student council leader mode. Selena continued to say that the matches would be held in a traditional tournament format, with victory being deemed as the opponent's inability to continue fighting. The student turned to his classmate and asked contentedly if he wanted to make a bet on who would win this year. The classmate replied that he wanted to make the bet himself. Who won last year? One of the older twins? Was he not participating? He would be eliminated immediately after being publicly humiliated. The student turned to the female student and happily exclaimed that he would do his best for Ojo. She asked, how could it be otherwise? Selena said that there was no limit to the type of weapons used. However, weapons that lacked a weakening spell or had extremely deadly magic on them were strictly prohibited. Also, to ensure safe viewing, protective magic had been set up around the observers' seats. These are the basic rules of the tournament, and if they have any questions, they should feel free to ask any of the student council staff. She introduced herself and wished good luck to everyone participating. Then she declared that the traditional tournament of the first-year students of the Ferris Magic Knight Academy was open. The students happily began to cheer at her words. Meanwhile, Yuno began to tremble and said that he was nervous. Luna was surprised and asked if even he was nervous. The protagonist awkwardly said that he had never fought in front of so many people. He watched as a student was ordered that if he lost, she would fire him. Yuno thought that the tension behind the scenes was incredible. He couldn't believe that the tense atmosphere affected him. It was not surprising, especially considering that the winner was guaranteed a good future. And for the Ferris girls, this was something like a puppet war, where they could test their knights. Obviously, their desire to win is incredible, but fortunately for him, his lonely mistress is Luna, and he is not a child to indulge in such school events. Luna calmly said how noisy it is here. I wonder how much applause she can get. Yuno called out to her in confusion, and she said that she was joking, and he can do whatever he wants. She already told him, didn't she? She already likes his attitude towards her, although she would like him to continue pretending to be weak. In any case, he should remember that he is her knight. The protagonist looked at her questioningly. Luna turned to him and said that this time he will grant her wish too. Yuno scratched the back of his head and thought, as always, it is difficult to understand what is going on in her head. Maybe that is what makes her interesting. After Luna left, Athena came to him. He asked her if she was okay. Athena apologized in a confused manner and said that she was just a little nervous, since nothing like this had ever happened to her before. Yuno noticed how she was shaking and thought that Athena seemed to be much more nervous than he was. She had spent 12 years as a wandering goddess, and for the first time in their lives, the two who had made a contract with her were participating in a serious event, which was a tradition of this academy that she had only seen from afar for a long time. It was certainly impossible to describe how nervous she was right now. They were watching the other participants gather for the tournament. Yuno called out to her and asked if she couldn't see it. Everyone here was so nervous and everyone was at risk. Their status and prestige, all the effort they had put in all this time. And he was here with her, trying just as hard. Did she know why? Because he knew that Athena was watching over him. He would defeat anyone and everyone. Until recently he had suffered so much insult. But today, he would use the powers granted by Athena to turn insults into delight. The protagonist asked her to continue to watch over him and watch him raise his spear to the cheering crowd. He, as the one who had made a contract with her, would show her this changed scenery.